Lord of Mystery, I Married the Queen of Mystery by author Huo Yang. Chapter 51-75. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. And those who want to support me, I have a Patreon channel, get early access to video on Patreon. Chapter 51. Second time attending the Tarot Club. This time, Hermit Otis conducted research in the knowledge wilderness for a long time, equivalent to about a month in the outside world. Half of that time was spent researching how to modify those two magical arrays. The ancient magical array, which could analyze knowledge from the corpses of Beyonder creatures, only needed to be modified slightly to be usable. However, for the telepathy magical array, Otis had to strengthen and reconstruct it from its very principles. The principle of this magical array was to use the fluctuation of spirituality to achieve a certain co-frequency with the brainwave fluctuations of surrounding people, thus allowing one to perceive others' thoughts through one's own spirituality. But there was a big problem. The fluctuation of the magical array's spirituality was random, making it difficult to achieve co-frequency with the brainwaves of surrounding people. First, Otis strengthened the spirituality of the magical array, turning the receiving end into the outputting end. Then, it was about reconstructing the function of the magical array. Otis first raised the co-frequency of the spiritual waveband formed by the magical array. If it was a single channel before, now it was a dozen channels, greatly increasing the probability of co-frequency with others' brainwaves. But this still had a certain probability, and Otis was never satisfied with probabilistic functions. So, he thought of another method, using spirituality to change the brainwave band of the knowledge recipient. According to the results of Otis's previous research, many signals within the human body are also transmitted via spirituality as a medium, so theoretically, it was feasible to temporarily alter the recipient's brainwave frequency using spirituality. However, doing so would certainly cause great harm to the recipient. Otis adjusted it many times before finding an intensity that could achieve the goal without causing severe harm. Finally, this intricate and complex magical array took shape. After it began to operate, it divided into two situations. If the recipient's brainwave frequency matched the dozen channels available in the magical array, knowledge would be immediately infused. If it did not match, Otis left a magical array node and planned to install a crystal at the node. As long as the frequency did not match, the crystal would light up, and further operation would be required, either to end the knowledge infusion process or to inject spirituality into the crystal to continue manipulation. If the operation continued, the recipient might experience symptoms such as dizziness and nausea, but no lasting damage would be caused. The other half of Otis's time in the knowledge wilderness was spent researching the application of the magical arrays. Both magical arrays could operate normally, but one was responsible for extracting knowledge and the other for infusing knowledge. A channel was still missing in between. He conducted many material experiments and finally found a very suitable material, Amanda crystal. This crystal comes from the Amanda Mountains, where the Church of the Evernight Goddess is headquartered, and it is one of the auxiliary materials for the sleepless pathway to advance to Sequence 7, Nightmare. The main ability of Nightmare is to freely enter the dreams of sleepers, which is the process of one person's mind entering another person's mind. And the role of Amanda crystal is to some extent to find a suitable bridge for the thoughts of two people. Of course, its effect is negligible compared to Beyonder characteristic, but it is very suitable for Otis's design. Through engraving some mystical symbols, Otis could change certain characteristics of the other party, allowing them to transmit knowledge. After all the research was completed, Otis left the knowledge wilderness and returned to the real world. Upon returning to the real world, he first used meditation for a long period of self-hypnosis to clearly confirm that he was currently in the real world. After a while, Otis felt his state of mind was normal and then sighed inwardly, "Fortunately, I only did research in the knowledge wilderness and nothing else. At most, this made me feel like I had a very tiring dream. If I had lived a normal life in there, I would definitely have taken that life as reality." Otis glanced at his pocket watch and, seeing that there was still time to rest, he used meditation again to fall asleep and then slept in the next morning, getting up after 9 o'clock. After getting up, he first made himself some noodles for breakfast, then went to the basement and used the family's spirituality powder mixed with essential oils to draw the sub-array for transmitting materials to the knowledge wilderness. He first experimented with a Beyonder weapon. After activating the magical array with spirituality, the weapon was indeed transmitted into the knowledge wilderness. If he wanted to take it out for use, he would need to reactivate the magical array with spirituality and then complete the retrieval process. So, he sent all his spiritual weapons, as well as nearly £3,000 in cash, into the knowledge wilderness. Afterward, Otis cut a piece of bedsheet and, using the remaining spiritual materials and essential oils, drew an identical sub-array on the bedsheet. It also worked normally. Once the essential oil dried, he folded this magical array and carried it with him for readiness. Upon arriving at the herb shop, Otis first made a list and had Kane send it to 117 Empress Avenue. That was Viscount Kelton's mansion. This Viscount had always served the royal family, managing Beander-related businesses for them, and he had a relatively complete stock of high-grade spiritual materials. However, they would be 10% to 20% more expensive than spiritual materials at Beander gatherings, but Otis had a large demand. If he traded through Beander gatherings, he didn't know when his needs would be met, so he basically ordered goods from Viscount Kelton. All without error, one by one, 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 one by one. According to previous transaction processes, delivery usually wouldn't happen until the afternoon, so Otis continued to conceptualize the fighting outline. Around 2 in the afternoon, he had Kane watch the shop while he returned to the lounge and laboratory to take a nap. At exactly 3 o'clock, Otis's vision was covered by dense gray fog. The next moment, he had appeared in a majestic and grand palace, sitting at one side of an ancient bronze long table. "Good afternoon, Fool." Justice, Audrey, as usual, smiled and rose, bowing to the highest seat. After receiving a slight nod from the Fool Klein, she greeted Magician, the Hanged Man, the World, and Hermit separately. Finally, her gaze rested on the sun. "What are you worried about?" Audrey keenly noticed that the sun looked very uneasy. Hermit Otis, sitting next to the son Derek, also noticed his unease. If Audrey hadn't asked, he would have asked himself. Derek did not hide anything and immediately recounted in full how he successfully feigned illness and was sent to the bottom of the round tower for isolated treatment. At the end, he asked, "Respected Fool, will that mystical item discover that I am participating in the Tarot Club?" Klein, behind the gray fog, thought to himself, "How would I know? I don't even know what it is." But seeing the son's eager gaze, and not feeling any power attempting to invade, Klein, casually, replied, "Normally, it wouldn't discover it. But some mystical items possess peculiar effects." Otis opened his mouth. "Isn't that like saying nothing at all? Thank you very much for your initial subscriptions. The results are not much, but better than the initial subscriptions of the previous book *****. Chapter 52 Amen. Hermit Otis glanced at son Derek, who was beside him. Seeing that Derek was immediately relieved, he knew that the young man had misunderstood, just as the Fool Klein had expected, believing that the Fool had given a positive answer. After Derek finally relaxed, he then asked, "Have you heard of a person named Amen?" Justice, Audrey looked at the Hanged Man Alger. She remembered that the Hanged Man had mentioned this name before. Klein also recalled relevant knowledge, but to maintain the Fool's profound image, he did not rush to answer. Magician Furs listened with a blank expression. This name was already beyond her scope of knowledge. Alger retorted, "Did your City of Silver encounter someone named Amen during your exploration of the surrounding areas? Or did you find similar records?" Derek nodded seriously and said, "Yes, 42 years ago, an exploration team encountered someone who claimed to be Amen. After returning to City of Silver, they successively went mad and lost control. Only the captain of that exploration team was locked in the bottom of the round tower, right next to me. Maybe he also went crazy, and that was just a delusion." Furs, with rich experience in novel writing, offered a guess. Alger, however, said, "Delusion is a possibility, but the name, Amen, wouldn't appear without reason." He turned his head to the sun and said, 1500 years ago, or even longer, in our country, there was once a family that wielded strange power. They belonged to the Tudor dynasty, and their surname was indeed Amen. A message came from King of the Five Seas Nast that the Amen family was a blasphemer family, and they possessed the secret of stealing the power of gods. Everyone listened in confusion, feeling that, the secret of stealing the power of gods, sounded very powerful, but they didn't know what it specifically referred to. Otis spoke, "Regarding Amen, I do know some relevant information." It was already his second time attending the meeting, so there was no need to hide things like last time. Moreover, he planned to conduct a few small transactions at this gathering, making good use of the Tarot Club's channels. Otis felt everyone looking at him and continued, "Everyone should have heard of the Marauder pathway. I've obtained some information about this pathway. They steal things at low sequence, and at mid-sequence, it is said they can steal thoughts and Beander abilities. But it's only a temporary theft." Alger also knew similar information. Connecting it with his previous words, he suddenly had a bold guess. "You mean, at high sequence, they can steal the power of gods?" As soon as these words came out, everyone except Otis suddenly felt their hair stand on end. Even Alger was a little surprised. How could I have such a thought? This is blasphemy against the gods. How can the power of gods be stolen? Finally, he had to admit, well, this idea seems plausible too. Klein, behind the gray fog, had a similar thought. He mused, what a strange power. Audrey, relatively calmly, recalled some information she had obtained at the Tarot Club before. Since every pathway has sequence 0, then it is not unacceptable for the sequence 0 of the Marauder pathway to steal the power of other gods. She looked deeply at the hermit. As long as there is information in this regard, it is not difficult to connect, but people generally do not think in this direction because it is too blasphemous to the gods. But the hermit had obviously thought of this point long ago. Derek also understood the hermit's meaning. He asked, Mr. Hermit, do you mean that the Aemon family possesses the Marauder pathway? Yes. Otis gave a positive answer. Another piece of information I am very sure of is that Aemon is a descendant of the ancient sun god. After speaking, he looked deeply at Derek. But Otis saw the sun frowning deeply, lost in thought, which made him realize that the sun at this time did not yet know that the ancient sun god was there, omniscient and omnipotent creator. So Otis continued, I have another more valuable piece of information, but it requires a transaction. Derek immediately said, I am willing to trade. But then he said a little embarrassedly, but I don't have any gold pounds. It's okay. Otis said, I just happen to have other needs. He asked knowingly, what pathway of Beander are you? Bard. Derek immediately replied. Otis said, I need you to trade the Bard potion formula and some knowledge of the Forsaken Land of the Gods. Derek immediately nodded and said, okay. Klein, behind the gray fog, thought, new members are indeed still interested in the Forsaken Land of the Gods. Audrey recalled her suspicion of the hermit after the last Tarot Club meeting. At this moment, she suddenly had a new idea. It seems that the hermit did know a lot of information about the Forsaken Land of the Gods in advance. His surprise before seemed a bit abnormal, possibly because he didn't expect the sun to come from the Forsaken Land of the Gods. Thinking of this, Audrey smiled slightly. When I first learned that the sun was from the Forsaken Land of the Gods, I seemed to be as surprised as the hermit. Otis asked again, Tarot Club transactions can be communicated privately, right? Do you want to listen alone, or do you want everyone to listen together? Audrey enthusiastically replied, yes, you just need to apply to Fool. Let's all listen together. Derek said, consider it as thanks for all the advice and help everyone has given me. Audrey felt somewhat ashamed, because most of that help was given by the hanged man, and she had provided almost no help. Good. Otis continued, I believe everyone knows the concept of demigods, so I don't need to explain it. I've obtained such a definite piece of information. When the Marauder pathway reaches demigod, there is an ability called parasitism. This ability allows the demigod of that pathway to hide within another person's body. Klein, behind the gray fog. This reminds me of a certain poet friend. I wonder if he's doing well now. He then thought, what a strange pathway, I should stay away from thieves in the future. Alger couldn't help but frown. This is the power of a demigod. It really is a qualitative change, just like in the legends. Derek thought of the exploration team captain next door to him, Mr. Hermit, are you saying that Aemon, whom the exploration team encountered more than 40 years ago, is hidden inside the person next door to me? Listen to me first. Otis continued, parasitism is divided into two types. The first type is when a Marauder pathway demigod parasitizes within the host's body. Generally, such situations rarely occur because the host's thoughts and consciousness would be a disturbance to the Marauder demigod. They only do this when they lose their own body. The other situation is when a Marauder demigod creates a special entity, similar to a clone, and parasitizes it within another person's body. This kind of parasitism usually goes unnoticed, and that clone will gradually take over the host's body and thoughts, eventually turning them into their puppet. Audrey exclaimed, what a terrifying ability. Chapter 53, Flora and Fauna around Silver City. Justice, Audrey's exclamation voiced everyone's inner thoughts. As a group of mid-sequence and low-sequence beyonders, it was difficult for them to imagine that a demigod could possess such bizarre and unpredictable abilities. Perhaps a good friend of theirs, after being parasitized, would completely transform into another person's puppet, with those around them barely noticing. The son Derek made a judgment. The person living next door to me was very likely parasitized by Aemon using the second method. That's possible, Odysseus said, spreading his hands. But I can't be certain. Magician Furs also sighed, it's hard to imagine such an ability exists. Odysseus smiled and said, as far as I know, once one reaches the demigod level, Beyonder abilities seem to undergo a qualitative change. Then he said to Derek, when you interact with the person next door after the gathering, be sure to be careful. If you feel uncomfortable, ask for help immediately. Thank you for the reminder. Derek also realized that the person next door was very dangerous. He paused for a moment before coming back to his senses, requesting paper and pen from the fool Klein, expressing the potion formula, and handing it to Hermit. Odysseus took it and glanced at it. Sequence 9, Bard. Main ingredients: a crystallized sunflower or the tail feather of an adult firestone bird or a pyre bird, a mermaid stone or a singing sunflower. Auxiliary ingredients: 1 midsummer grass, 5 drops of July wine liquid, 1 elven dark leaf. With just one glance, he could firmly remember it, and then, under the control of his will, the paper in his hand first became illusory, and soon disappeared. Odysseus then said to the sun, after the last gathering, I collected some information about the forsaken land of the gods. This made me think of a very interesting question that I hope to discuss with you. Klein and Hanged Man Alger both noticed a detail. The hermit had a channel through which he could collect information about the forsaken land of the gods. The forsaken land of the gods was not some top-secret information in the Beyonder world, but information about it mostly existed as legends or rumors, making it difficult to obtain useful information. Churches or some Beyonder families might have some accurate information, but it would certainly be difficult to trade for. This seemed to confirm Klein and Alger's previous guess. The hermit had special intelligence channels. This was, of course, a signal Odysseus deliberately released. He knew so many astonishing historical facts and pieces of information, so astonishing that those pieces of information only dared to be traded at the Tarot Club. With such a prelude, and if he continued to lay the groundwork a few more times, even trading information about the fall of the ancient sun god later would not cause too much suspicion. Derek, however, didn't think so much. May I ask what you want to know about the forsaken land of the gods? In his opinion, the hermit's information just now was more valuable than a sequence 9 potion formula, so he would actively answer the hermit's questions. Everyone else listened carefully to their conversation, curious about what interesting question the hermit had thought of. Are there still animals in the forsaken land of the gods? Odysseus asked. Are there still plants? Alger frowned slightly. What kind of question is this? Klein, behind the gray fog, seemed to understand something. I almost forgot, this hermit is a research-oriented talent. Such people often conduct astonishing research in seemingly ordinary places and obtain astonishing answers. Audrey also had a premonition that this question might develop in a very profound direction. Yes. Derek paused for a moment before answering, but they might be different from the plants and animals on your side. They are more like monsters, basically all highly poisonous, or very aggressive. Odysseus continued, please describe 2 animals and 2 plants in detail. Okay. Derek nodded and said, not far north of City of Silver, there's a swamp with a type of fish that has fangs and is highly poisonous. They are similar to the loaches described in textbooks, but the difference is that large ones can grow as tall as an adult and can stay on land for a long time. If you get close to the swamp, they will rush out of the swamp and actively attack humans. Furs tried to imagine a fish chasing a person. What a wonderful world. To the east of the city, there's a type of insect that likes to suck blood and brain marrow, Derek continued. It's about as long and thick as an adult's index finger, and it always moves in groups. Whether they encounter humans or any animal, they will use their sharp mouthparts to drill into the animal's body. If not dealt with in time, it can even drill into the brain. Audrey frowned, feeling a bit disgusted and a bit terrified. Odysseus, however, further asked, what do these 2 creatures usually feed on? Every word, every sentence, every detail is perfect. Derek replied, monsters. He further explained, the forsaken land of the gods is filled with humanoid or strangely shaped monsters wandering everywhere. Odysseus slowly nodded, making a gesture to, please continue. Derek continued, also not far from the swamp north of the city, there is a plant with sharp thorns and rope-like vines. Besides having roots to absorb water and nutrients from the soil, they can also hunt animals or monsters. Some of these plant vines have suckers, and some barbs have different toxins. We occasionally collect these vines to extract the toxins for use. Alger now noticed, the sun has been attending the Tarot Club for so long, yet I have never thought of inquiring about common information like the forsaken land of the gods. Just by listening to him describe these animals and plants, I have already gained a deep understanding of life in the forsaken land of the gods. While sighing, he glanced at the hermit, still not understanding his purpose. When talking about the last type of plant, Derek's face finally showed some smiles. Inside our City of Silver, there is black-faced grass everywhere. Its color is completely black, and its leaves, after maturing, can be ground into food. It is precisely because of the existence of black-faced grass that most of us have not experienced mutation or deformity. This is a gift from the gods, and it is our hope to persevere. Audrey saw the sun smile, took a deep breath, and also smiled. Yes, it must be the hope given to you by the gods. At this moment, she felt a little sorry for the sun. He must have never eaten cheese or toast. The world, sitting at the bottom, reminded in a low voice, normal within abnormal is a kind of abnormal. Chapter 54, Mutation of Species in the Forsaken Land of Gods. The sun, Derek was slightly stunned by, the world's reminder. Ever since he was a child, he had grown up eating food made from black-faced grass powder. Now, someone was suddenly telling him that black-faced grass was not a normal plant. It was like someone telling, Justice, Audrey, that wheat was a poisonous weed. Hermit, Odysseus asked Derek, where does black-faced grass grow? On the city walls, on rooftops, and in the streets, Derek replied. Magician, Furs thought to herself, it just doesn't grow in fields. That is indeed a bit abnormal. Odysseus asked again, does it grow outside the city? No. Have similar plants been found around the city? No. Then there's no problem. Feel free to keep eating it, Odysseus said with certainty. Justice, Audrey asked a step ahead of Derek, Mr. Hermit, how did you come to that conclusion? Odysseus said, the growth range of black-faced grass is very similar to the description of a high-level sealed artifact. He paused and smiled, I haven't seen a high-level sealed artifact, but I've heard some people talk about them. Some of them have effects that cover an entire city. It sounds like the appearance of black-faced grass is the effect of some sealed artifact. Derek opened his mouth, this was something he had never thought of. The fool, Klein, behind the gray fog, sighed, Hermit is very knowledgeable. He also thought that sealed artifacts must have negative effects and was about to control the world, to remind them, but after thinking about it, he decided not to. After all, the sun only had that one type of food. Since no mutations or deformities had occurred, even if there were some negative effects, it seemed acceptable. Audrey, on the other hand, was somewhat relieved. The new member had already integrated into the Tarot Club and was helping other members solve problems with his extensive knowledge. At this moment, Furs had only one thought in her mind, he seemed so formidable. At the same time, she thought of a question, Mr. Hermit, why is the effective range of those high-level sealed artifacts a city? She felt her question wasn't precise enough, so she rephrased it, Backland and Pritz Harbor in the south are both cities, but their areas and populations are not on the same scale at all. Can the effect of a high-level sealed artifact cover Pritz Harbor and also cover Backland? Odysseus smiled, this question involves the issue of conceptualization. It is said that high-level sealed artifacts all possess a certain conceptual definition. So their effective range is also a concept like a city, or a country. If you want to know more detailed information, I can help you find out, but that information is very high level and requires a transaction. No need, Furs said with a smile. Although, Hermit's explanation made her even more curious, she was currently saving money to buy the main materials for her advancement and didn't have extra pounds to satisfy her curiosity. Klein, however, thought of the concept of uniqueness. Because the Black Emperor card had given him some understanding of this concept, he was very eager to know the details, but since this matter was not urgent, he was unwilling to pay in pounds. Alger also realized that the conceptualization mentioned by Hermit must be extremely high-end Beander information, but he planned to conduct the transaction when needed. Odysseus then said to the relieved Derek, I have channels to learn more about Aemon. Do you want to continue trading with me? Yes. Derek immediately said, but what do I use to trade? The Praying Light Man potion formula. I need you to catch a fish from the swamp and give me a small bucket of mud from the swamp, Odysseus said. Also, catch a few blood-sucking insects, give me a plant with thorns and toxins on its vines, and a bucket of soil, and if it's convenient, dig up a few black-faced grasses for me. The other members were all stunned, not expecting Hermit to ask for these things. Derek then said, Mr. Hermit, these things are not very valuable, and their value is not equivalent to your information. Perhaps they have no value in the forsaken land of the gods, Odysseus said with a smile. Audrey asked curiously, Mr. Hermit, could you tell us why you need these things? Odysseus replied, for experiments. Klein controlled the world, and asked, do you want to compare the species from the forsaken land of the gods with the species from our world to see what differences there are? Yes, Odysseus replied. Alger also joined the conversation, is there any meaning to this? This goes back to a previous study of mine. Odysseus did not hide. A few years ago, a study of mine found that the spirituality contained within normal human bodies has an activity similar to self-circulation within the human body. Not a single error, a single word, a single hair, a single content, all in one go. Klein, behind the gray fog, thought to himself, this is a bit like the theory of meridians in traditional Chinese medicine. Odysseus continued to explain, normally, this circulation will gradually decline, and eventually the spirituality within the body will dissipate, corresponding to the process of a person's aging or death. However, many external forces can affect this circulation. For example, some meander pollution can break such a circulation, causing spirituality to exhibit more complex movement trajectories, thereby affecting the spirit body, mind, and physical body. Thus, meander pollution can cause a person to become ill in minor cases, or go mad, lose control, or have their spirituality circulation instantly and completely disrupted, turning into a monster, in severe cases. Everyone was stunned. This was the first time they had heard of such a theory. Klein thought of the relevant content in the Book of Secrets. Hermit's research on spirituality seems to be even more profound than that of the Witch King. The plants and animals in the forsaken land of the gods have obviously undergone a certain degree of mutation, Odysseus continued. For me, these are excellent research samples. Everyone nodded, understanding Odysseus's purpose. Furs sighed, this is my first time encountering a meander scholar. I heard that there are such professions in the Orthodox churches, but, Hermit, doesn't seem to be from an Orthodox church. Audrey also asked curiously, Mr. Hermit, what is your research direction? Spirituality and the application of magic arrays, Odysseus said. Magic arrays. Alger was a bit surprised. Are you talking about those magic arrays like pentagrams, or six-pointed stars? Back when he was trained in mysticism, he hated these tedious magic arrays the most. They were troublesome and useless. The other members, who had not undergone systematic mysticism training, were somewhat confused, including Klein. Theoretically, after he became a Sequence 8 in the Nighthawks team, he would have had the opportunity to go to Backland for further advanced mysticism studies. Unfortunately, he died before he received the notice for further studies. Precisely those magic arrays, Odysseus said, they possess infinite power and a variety of uses. Alger fell into deep self-doubt. Are we talking about the same thing? Chapter 55, Incomplete Mysticism. The hermit Odysseus smiled after hearing the hanged man Alger's question. I know that in most people's impressions, magic arrays are not very effective. That's because they don't understand what spirituality is, and they don't understand the meaning of mysticism symbols. Justice, Audrey was a little surprised. Mr. Hermit, I have also learned some mysticism symbols, and they don't seem to be very difficult to understand. Odysseus said, that's because you learned common mysticism symbols, or rather, universal mysticism symbols. Magic arrays composed of those symbols indeed have limited effects. Alger asked, are there some uncommon mysticism symbols? Yes. Alger then asked, mysticism symbols that even the church hasn't mastered? That's right. Odysseus smiled. When the churches of the seven gods rose, many mysticism symbols were already lost. Even Klein, behind the gray fog, was a little surprised. The hermit's tone was not small. Audrey had a similar evaluation, but then she thought, the hermit is not someone who likes to exaggerate. His words just now were stating facts. Alger didn't think so, but he also knew that every tarot club member was extraordinary, so he didn't rush to express his opinion. At this moment, the son Derek said, Mr. Hermit, are you studying the mysticism symbols we use? Before the Great Cataclysm, there was no mention of the churches of the seven gods, but in Derek's impression, magic arrays didn't seem to have much use in actual combat. Odysseus smiled and said, this is not a matter of time. Before discussing this issue, let me first ask everyone a question. In your impression, what are mysticism symbols? This stumped everyone. Finally, Alger briefly explained the Storm Church's interpretation of mysticism symbols. They are a kind of symbol for humans to communicate with nature and with the meander. Then he talked about his feelings, but this kind of communication seems to require reaching a certain level to be effective. At least so far, I haven't felt any effect. Odysseus asked again. Everyone knows ancient Hermes language and giant language, right? Why are these two languages different from the languages we use daily? Klein knew this. He manipulated the world and said in a hoarse voice, that's because of a long period of evolution. And in daily life, our language doesn't need to mobilize the power of nature. That's right, evolution. Odysseus raised his hand and said, giant language and ancient Hermes language can still mobilize the power of nature, but mysticism symbols, which also serve as a means of communicating with nature, no longer have this effect. Klein understood and continued to manipulate the world to ask further. You mean that in the process of evolution, these mysticism symbols, like Loan language and Fasak language, have lost the effect of communicating with nature? Alger, however, asked another question. Is there an intrinsic connection between mysticism symbols and giant language or ancient Hermes language? At this point, Audrey and the others felt a little strained, but they could still understand what they were saying. Odysseus first answered Alger's question. In our normal lives, only with the cooperation of language and writing can we record and transmit information. Then in the field of mysticism, why isn't it the cooperation of language and writing? Alger was stunned, unable to refute for a moment. Then Odysseus answered the world's question. Not only have they lost the ability to communicate with nature, but my research has found that the human mysticism symbol system is very incomplete. It's like there are some meanings we can express in language, but we can't find the corresponding words. The hall fell silent, because the mysticism knowledge of the other members present had not touched upon this aspect. After a long while, the world said, "This is a very profound study." Alger also felt the same and no longer had any thoughts of refuting. Odysseus spread his hands and smiled. This is probably my research direction. By the way, I also want to initiate a transaction. Everyone came back to their senses one after another, looking at the hermit, wondering who he was going to trade with. Odysseus said, I want to trade sequence 9 potion formulas with everyone. Magician Furs asked, what pathway? Odysseus, however, asked back, may I ask what your pathway is? Apprentice. Then I will trade the apprentice potion formula with you. Odysseus said, how about 260 pounds? Half of the members of the Mysticism Research Society he founded were low sequence beyonders when they joined, and the other half were mysticism enthusiasts who aspired to become beyonders and had access to certain intelligence channels. This was because at that time, Odysseus was only a sequence 9. If he recruited mid-sequence members, he was afraid that he would not be able to control them, so all the Beyander members were low sequence. Now that he is sequence 8, he plans to sell formulas to those mysticism enthusiasts. Before this, he strictly prohibited the sale of formulas at gatherings, because although some members like Hound had potion formulas, they basically would not sell them, or they had to report to their superiors and could only sell them after their superiors agreed. And Peacock and Wolverine would certainly be willing to sell formulas, but they had potion formulas for pathways like Assassin and Secret Supplicant. Odysseus did not intend to turn the research society into a base for cultivating cult members, so he simply prohibited the sale of formulas. Now that he was preparing to lift the restrictions, he planned to master formulas for several more pathways and present them to the mysticism enthusiasts. This way, they would have more choices, and if someone still chose the Assassin or Secret Supplicant formulas, Odysseus would not interfere. Furs pondered for a moment and said, deal. Although she became an apprentice by using Mrs. Annalise's Beyander characteristic, she later obtained the apprentice potion formula when sorting through Mrs. Annalise's belongings. This formula was useless there, and she had no reason to refuse the 260 pounds beckoning to her. Furs applied to Mr. Fool to express the apprentice potion formula, and the gold pounds would be paid to Magician after the gathering ended by sacrificing to Mr. Fool. Odysseus then said to Audrey, Miss Justice, are you planning to sell a sequence 9 potion formula? Audrey also thought for a moment before saying, okay, but I don't want gold pounds. I want to ask you some questions about mysticism symbols. Odysseus thought to himself, she truly regards gold pounds as dirt. He nodded, yes, as long as it's not confidential information, I can trade it with you. Let me think about it first. Audrey said, I haven't decided exactly what to ask yet. Okay. So Audrey also applied to Mr. Fool for paper and pen, expressed the spectator potion formula, and it appeared before Odysseus. Odysseus then went to ask the world, are you planning to sell a potion formula? The world, however, chuckled in a low voice, of course, but I have another potion formula here that you might be more interested in. Odysseus was stunned. What pathway? What sequence? The world said in a deep voice, the mystery prior pathway, sequence 7 Feet Magician. Chapter 56 Obtaining the Wizard Potion Recipe. When the fool Klein helped the hermit defeat an enemy last time, he realized that the hermit was a low sequence Beyander. At the beginning of this tarot club meeting, Klein noticed that the hermit's spirit body had changed, indicating that he had advanced to sequence 8. As for the hermit's pathway, Klein discovered that when the hermit attended the meeting this time, the pattern on the back of his chair had changed, becoming a pair of cold, indifferent, eyelash-less eyes containing countless brilliant stars. Klein had seen this symbol when dealing with old Neil's incident, so he was certain that the hermit was a beyander of the mystery prior pathway and would definitely need the wizard's potion formula. Old Neil. Klein, behind the above the gray fog, thought of this and showed a comical smile. I do need this potion formula, Odysseus said. Name your price. He was a bit curious, where did Klein get the wizard's potion formula? Klein, manipulating the world, said, 700 pounds. He had obtained it when divining about the hermit, at the cost of his own head on the above the gray fog instantly shattering. Selling the potion formula to the hermit could be considered getting some compensation back from the hermit. Deal, Odysseus said immediately. Seeing the other party agree so readily, Klein felt a bit regretful, wishing he had asked for 800 pounds. Odysseus added, however, it will take a few days for me to pay you. He had just lamented yesterday that he hadn't had 3,000 pounds in savings for a long time, but today he had already overspent. First, Odysseus had just acquired a batch of high-grade spirituality materials from Viscount Kelton in the morning, totaling over 2,300 pounds, and the 2 potion formulas at the Tarot Club cost nearly 1,000 pounds. His proud savings had bottomed out and turned negative. Klein, manipulating the world, nodded. All right. Odysseus asked, are you still trading your own potion formula? Trading. Also 260 pounds, Odysseus said, I'll trade with you together. Deal, the world said indifferently. Odysseus then looked at the hanged man Alger. I will have more funds coming in recently, so we can confirm the transaction first. He paused and asked, do you plan to sell your potion formula? Alger replied, sell. May I ask what your pathway is? Sailor. Odysseus feigned a slight surprise. This pathway is a bit troublesome, but it can still be traded. Consider it part of my collection. How about 260 pounds? This was a pathway of the Orthodox churches, and trading such a potion formula would be a bit troublesome. Okay, Alger judged in his heart, the hermit is a runus. Based on the hermit's attire, he had roughly confirmed this point, but he did not rule out that the hermit was using clothing to mislead. But now Alger was certain that the hermit was a runus, because the Storm Church only preached in Loan, and people from other countries would not consider the Sailor Pathway's potion formula troublesome. Odysseus completed all transactions, leaned back in his chair, and stopped speaking. At this moment, Justice Audrey looked towards the head of the bronze long table and said, Mr. Fool, I request a private conversation. Klein smiled helplessly inwardly, again. He nodded gently and said, you may. When Odysseus's senses were blocked, he suddenly thought, it's been 2 meetings, why hasn't anyone offered Russell's diary to the fool? He recalled carefully, as if remembering what happened. At this time, Magician Furs also seemed to have just joined the Tarot Club, and Audrey, in order to prevent Furs from borrowing Russell's notes from her in reality, causing a duplicate sacrifice, had always conducted private conversations when sacrificing the diary. Audrey planned to find an opportunity to tell Furs that the notes in her hand had been torn up by Susie, and then she would openly sacrifice the diary. Odysseus sighed. It seemed he would have to wait a bit longer to extract the remaining value from the 5 pages of the diary he had handled. After the private conversation ended, Klein lifted the sensory block on the other members. You may continue. Furs took a breath and said, I want to purchase a spirit eater's stomach and 20 milliliters of deep-sea lancefish blood. These were 2 main materials for Trickmaster. She still had 430 pounds in savings, plus the 260 pounds she had just earned from her trade with the hermit. With 690 pounds, if she was lucky enough to encounter cheaper Beander materials, she could solve the main material problem. Furs couldn't help but sigh inwardly. If it weren't for the need to completely get rid of the influence of the full moon's ravings and become a Trickmaster, having 690 pounds would allow her to live a very relaxed and comfortable life, even in Backland. 2 or 3 seconds later, Alger said in a deep voice, I saw deep-sea lancefish blood at a pirate gathering before, but unfortunately, you've missed it. Not a single mistake, not a single omission, not a single error in content. Furs said, Mr. Hanged Man, please keep an eye out for me. Prices between 300 and 400 pounds are acceptable. Okay, Alger nodded. The son Derek spoke, I know the approximate range of a few spirit eaters, but I don't need the pounds you're talking about. Furs asked with some curiosity, then what do you want? Audrey quickly answered in her mind, the Solar High Priest's potion formula. Derek thought for a moment and indeed said, the Solar High Priest's potion formula. This is a sequence 7 formula, which would cost at least 750 pounds. This was information Furs had inadvertently learned when helping the world acquire magical items of the Sun Pathway. She paused and then added, and the 2 Beander materials I need are no more than 400 pounds each, and most of the time they are only worth 300 pounds. Derek said without hesitation, I can give you 2 to 3 Spirit Eater stomachs. Furs was a bit helpless. If she were to sell the extra Spirit Eater stomachs, she didn't know when they would sell. She tried her best to maintain a smile and said, I will try to collect them. At this moment, Odysseus added, if you want to complete the transaction, please sell the Spirit Eater corpses to me, 100 pounds per corpse. Other parts of the Spirit Eater corpse were also very good spirituality materials. Derek nodded after a slight stunned, okay. Furs glanced at the hermit. Didn't the hermit run out of money? How did he spend 200 or 300 pounds again without even blinking? Klein, behind the above the gray fog, also thought to himself, Sir, you're not planning to use a credit card, are you? You've already overdrawn quite a bit. After complaining about the hermit for a couple of sentences, he had the world say in a hoarse voice, please keep an eye out for the thousand-faced hunter's mutated pituitary gland and blood, as well as the characteristics of human skin phantom and the hair of deep-sea gannets. Everyone agreed. After a few seconds of silence in the hall, the free exchange session began. After about 10 minutes of discussion, the fool announced the end of the Tarot Club meeting. Chapter 57. Another new fund has arrived for everyone's monthly tickets. In the forsaken land of the gods, City of Silver, at the base of the Round Tower. After the Tarot Club ended, Derek returned to reality. He cautiously sat for a few seconds, found nothing unusual, and finally let out a complete sigh of relief. Recalling the information exchanged at the Tarot Club, he quietly pressed his ear against the wall to listen to the movement next door. Suddenly, an old and ethereal voice came from behind Derek, where did you go just now? Derek instantly froze, every hair on his body standing on end. But the combat experience accumulated from continuous patrols and outdoor explorations allowed him to quickly calm down. He didn't rush to turn around, instead, he clasped his hands tightly beneath his chin, as if in prayer. The small room suddenly brightened, and pure beams of light, wreathed in flames, descended from the ceiling, striking the person behind him. Just then, Derek was astonished to see the holy light he had prayed for suddenly thicken, becoming so brilliant that he couldn't open his eyes. Within the light, someone pounced behind Derek, followed by a shrill scream. Only then did Derek dare to look back. In the strong light, he saw a phantom, dressed in a black classical robe, wearing a pointed soft hat, with black hair, a wide forehead, and a monocle carved from crystal. Soon, the strong light receded, and Derek saw the gray-haired Chief, Colin, and on the bed behind him, he saw a translucent small worm. It was only thumb-long, with transparent segments, dividing it into many sections. Derek was first stunned, then realized the danger had passed. Your Excellency, Chief. Colin nodded lightly. We always knew he had a problem, but in order to find out what that person named Amon's purpose was, we deliberately didn't eliminate him directly. Unfortunately, until today, he was normal. Then he turned to Derek and asked, why do you think he suddenly mutated? Do you feel any different from others? Derek frowned and fell silent, but soon he remembered that Mr. Hermit had once said that Amon was a descendant of the ancient sun god. So he replied, perhaps it's because my Beyander pathway is different from others. Colin's expression didn't change. What were you doing in the room just now? I was attending the Tarot Club. Derek suddenly realized that things might not be as simple as he imagined. He took a deep breath and said, sleeping. Colin quietly looked into Derek's eyes, and after more than 10 seconds, he said, before he mutated, did you notice anything unusual? No. Derek shook his head with certainty. The bottom of the round tower fell silent again. After another 10 seconds, Colin said, your condition is stable, you can go back. Derek was stunned. Okay. He took a deep breath and left the round tower along the corridor. On the way, he met the guardians who were arriving one after another. They didn't even ask Derek a question and let him pass directly. Derek quickly returned home, closed the door, and carefully observed for a while. Seeing nothing unusual, he then whispered, fool who does not belong to this era. I just experienced something terrible. He reported everything that had just happened to Fool and mentioned his guess, hoping to get an answer from Mr. Fool. As the tension receded, he felt intense fatigue, so he lay down on the bed and quickly fell asleep. In the quiet, dim room, flashes of lightning sometimes illuminated everything, and sometimes disappeared into darkness. The sleeping Derek suddenly twitched the corner of his mouth and raised his hand to make a gesture of pinching his eye socket. Hey, fool. Interesting. Backland, West District, 51 Henry Street. Odysseus opened his eyes and saw the ceiling of the lounge, then let out a big yawn, truly feeling a bit sleepy. However, he was destined to have no time for a nap today. He got up and first sacrificed £260 to the fool, completing the transaction with magician. Then he came to the front shop, first summarized the accounts sent by Enoch and Mandy's assistant, and listened to their simple reports. As he expected, shortly after, Viscount Kelton's subordinate delivered the high-grade spirituality materials Odysseus had ordered. Those spirituality materials were packed in 2 large leather cases. They contained not only the materials Odysseus needed for his upcoming experiments but also the spirituality materials required to make the flamebolt. After inspecting the goods at the counter, Odysseus paid £2,360, and his savings instantly bottomed out. Taking these materials to the backyard, he began to process them, preparing to concoct the spiritual paint for drawing the flamebolt array. He needed to complete this order quickly to get the £2,000 final payment from Bernadette. Also, Klein didn't mention trading the flamebolt at today's gathering. Odysseus estimated that the deal had probably fallen through. No mistake, no single word, no single character, no single content, all in one glance. But it didn't matter. Bernadette's money was enough to cover the bounce check he had issued at the Tarot Club. At dinner time, Max, the team leader of Machinery Hivemind, invited Odysseus to dinner. Only then did Odysseus remember that he had another sum of money coming in. The two found a nearby restaurant and also requested a private room. Before the dishes started to arrive, the two discussed business. "I asked Captain Ekenzer for you at an appropriate time," Max said, smoking. "Unless you join Machinery Hivemind, it will be difficult to apply for the wizard potion formula for you." Odysseus was slightly stunned. If it had been before today, Max's words would have left him no choice but to consider trading with Bernadette, but with the formula trade at the Tarot Club, he said quite easily, "Okay, no problem. Convert all those merits into gold pounds for me. You've made the right choice." Max was also very happy. If Odysseus had insisted, he wouldn't have known how to persuade him. "Your previous intelligence helped us destroy a Rose School stronghold. The captain said that you should be given more reward for this case. Originally, we planned to reward you £600. Since you gave up the wizard potion formula and want gold pounds instead, I can help you apply for a bit more by combining the two." He thought for a moment. £1,500 should be no problem. "That's great," Odysseus said truthfully. "It just so happens to cover my financial shortfall." Max was slightly stunned. "Are you conducting new research again?" He thought to himself. No wonder he gave up the wizard potion formula. "That's right. I've always wanted to ask you, why don't you join Machinery Hivemind? With your research achievements and talent, wouldn't it be better to focus on being a researcher in the church? The church would provide you with ample funds, and you would only need to research freely." Odysseus smiled. "I'm afraid if I really let loose with my research, I might bankrupt the Church of Steam and Machinery. Thank you all for your monthly votes. Adding another chapter is a small token of my appreciation. *******. Chapter 58, Attack of Amon's Clone. In the land abandoned by God, City of Silver. Derek suddenly awoke from his slumber. Before his eyes was an endless gray fog, and the lofty the fool. In his ears echoed a ethereal, distant voice, "I understand. I have something for you to do. Test whether this ritual is effective." Derek knew that Mr. Fool occasionally asked members of the Tarot Club to conduct experiments, so he wasn't surprised. He promptly sat up, found the spirituality materials he needed, and immediately began writing the corresponding symbols and markings. After completing all of that, he lit a candle, closed his eyes, lowered his head, and continuously chanted the honorific name of Fool, Fool who does not belong to this era. After chanting the honorific name an unknown number of times, Derek felt his spirit suddenly become entranced. He seemed to see figures of indescribable forms, different colored lights containing infinite knowledge, and a majestic, tall golden figure looking down on everything. This figure stood beside Mr. the Fool in the dense gray fog, with 12 pairs of dark and mysterious giant wings behind him. Unconsciously, Derek felt himself touch that figure, seemingly understanding what sunlight was, and also comprehending how to create holy water. The wondrous spiritual experience captivated Derek until everything vanished and the simple furniture in the room came into view, at which point he finally came back to his senses. Derek revealed a heartfelt smile. "Is this the mystical ritual mentioned in the textbooks? For over 2,000 years, no one in City of Silver has succeeded." He lowered his head and said sincerely, "Praise Mr. Fool." Just then, a scene suddenly appeared before his eyes. Derek saw himself, covered by a transparent, ethereal figure. That figure wore a black classical robe, a black pointed soft hat, and a crystal monocle on its face, coiling around him like a python. Derek was startled. That Aemon avatar isn't dead. He parasitized, inside my body under the watchful eyes of the magical items at the bottom of the round tower in chief. Thinking of this, the hair on his entire body stood on end. The scene continued. He saw that just as he was performing the mystical ritual, that Aemon Avatar extended a hand, as if to grasp the gray fog beneath Mr. Fool's feet. But the next second, the angel with 12 pairs of wings beside Mr. Fool suddenly leapt up and collided with the Aemon Avatar. The ethereal Aemon figure vanished. The scene also vanished, and Derek's heart finally returned to its place. Mr. Fool discovered the Aemon Avatar and ordered the angel serving him to deal with him. He once again praised sincerely, "Praise you, great Mr. Fool." Backland, West District, 51 Henry Street. Odysseus arrived at the pharmacy early today to slice some herbs. After working for a short while, Max entered the shop with breakfast. The two of them leisurely ate breakfast and chatted. Max asked Odysseus, "You're 25 this year too, haven't you thought about finding a wife?" Odysseus smiled, "Why find a wife? To manage your money." Max pointed to the cream bun in his hand, "And someone to prepare breakfast for you and your friends. It's hard to imagine that the boss behind the Nanmu ballroom doesn't even have a servant." Max had previously advised Odysseus many times to stop conducting those expensive researches, or to cooperate with the Church of Steam and Machinery for research, which could also provide financial support. But each time he advised, Odysseus refused with various excuses. Max even suspected if Odysseus was researching how to revive his family. For this, he asked scholars from the church to examine some of Odysseus's research, and after confirming that it was not about necromancy, Max stopped paying attention to the matter. Today his wife mentioned wanting to introduce her cousin to Odysseus, which is why Max brought up the matter. "It's too dangerous." Odysseus swallowed his food and said, "You also know that as Beyonders, we must constantly fight against losing control. It's truly too dangerous." Max knew Odysseus wasn't telling the truth, but he had nothing to say about this reason. After breakfast, Max handed the approved pounds to Odysseus, then took a carriage to work. Odysseus counted, it was exactly 1,500 pounds. Just then, Cain also arrived, so Odysseus said to him, "You take good care of the shop these 2 days. You can put off making Flamebolt for now." Cain understood, "You're going out for 2 more days." Odysseus hummed, and then reminded him which herbs needed slicing and which needed grinding. Then he came to the backyard, first set up a simple altar in the lounge, and sacrificed 12 £20 in cash to Mr. Fool, completing yesterday's transaction. The fool Klein, who received this money, was slightly stunned. He didn't expect Hermit to gather the money so quickly, which made him wonder, this guy wouldn't really go and swipe a credit card, would he? Soon, the potion formulas for Sailor, Seer, and Wizard appeared in Odysseus's mind. He focused on the Wizard formula, Sequence 7, Wizard. Main ingredients: a complete brain of a pale long-necked beast, 2 flying pung tree fruit. Auxiliary ingredients: 12 milliliters of silver-billed crane blood, 6 drops of aconite juice, 18 grams of black-edged lilac flower powder, 60 milliliters of pure water. Odysseus first memorized the 3 potion formulas, then sighed inwardly. Main ingredients at the Sequence 7 level are already quite rare on the market. Even for auxiliary ingredients, the herb shop doesn't have silver-billed crane blood. Odysseus had also attended some Beyonder gatherings, but had only heard of people trading flying pung tree fruit, never heard of anyone trading the brain of a pale long-necked beast. However, for him, the matter of advancement was not urgent. He could wait until the melee scholar potion began to digest, then try to trade with the Tarot Club or Bernadette. As for the Mysticism Research Society, that gathering was too low-level in Beyonder aspects, making it difficult to trade for main ingredients at the Sequence 7 level. After sighing for a while, Odysseus went to the adjacent warehouse to gather the spirituality materials and metal materials he needed, then entered the basement and used the teleportation array to arrive at his suburban laboratory, over 50 kilometers away from the herb shop. He planned to spend 2 days producing the research results from the knowledge wilderness. Placing the materials on the experimental bench, Odysseus first went to the desk to draw the blueprints, then lit the metallurgical furnace and began to create the metal body of the experimental product. Afterward, he engraved the magic array, mixed the coating with spirituality materials, and applied it to the engraved array. Finally, he inlaid the Amanda crystal and placed the Beyonder characteristic of the melee scholar, a black and white sphere with intermittent red patterns, in the center of the magic array above. This experimental product was finally completed. Just then, Odysseus saw a small line of pale text suddenly appear on the experimental bench in front of him. "I'm here." Chapter 59, Wisdom Helmet. Outside a warehouse in the docks area of Backland. Byron realized he was exposed when he saw a few of Cape Town's subordinates intentionally or unintentionally approaching him. He immediately handed his wallet to an assistant nearby. In a moment, I'll distract them. You take a hansom cab and go to 199 Heron Avenue as fast as possible. Tell the attendant there, Lion, asks, Leader, for help. When you see, Leader, don't hide anything. Tell him the truth no matter what he asks. The assistant was about to say something, but Byron interrupted. No time to explain, go quickly. Whether I live or not depends on how fast you get there. With that, Byron ran off without looking back, and as expected, attracted most of the pursuers. The assistant also understood the urgency of the situation and quickly left their monitored location. After multiple attempts to shake off the pursuers failed, he had no choice but to jump into a hansom cab and rush to the location Byron had mentioned. Backland's western suburbs, inside Odysseus's laboratory. Odysseus, who had been working continuously for 2 days, stared at the short message on the experimental table and only snapped back to reality after a moment. It was his secret signal with Bernadette. He smiled helplessly. Welcome. Bernadette's voice appeared in the air. Your expression doesn't look like you're welcoming me. Perhaps it's because I'm a bit tired, Odysseus said with a smile. After the experiment is over, I'm going to make myself a good lunch to treat myself. It's almost 5 in the afternoon now. Focused work always makes one forget the passage of time, Odysseus sighed, then asked, is there something you need me for? Bernadette, far away in Backland, used the formless servant by Odysseus's side to say, I'm just very curious about what you've researched this time. Odysseus casually asked, you haven't been observing my experimental process for the past 2 days, have you? No. Odysseus was momentarily stunned. Why did it sound like she was feeling guilty? Bernadette's voice came from the air again. What are you making? Odysseus smiled. This is definitely an invention that can change the future. As he spoke, he pulled back the carpet on the floor, revealing the 7-pointed star array beneath. But before that, I need to conduct a live experiment. You're actually going to conduct a live experiment. Otherwise, of course, I need to test this kind of thing to be assured, Odysseus said, picking up a jar of colorful powder from the table. Bernadette was a little surprised. I've never even conducted a live experiment. Odysseus, however, ignored the queen mystic, and instead, on his own, grabbed a handful of colorful powder, then placed the remaining powder from the jar into the outer circle of the 7-pointed star array. Then he sprinkled the powder from his hand into the array, and as a crackling sound erupted, Odysseus said in Hermes, I, in my name, summon. Lord of a certain place in the underworld, the great Semensal, please descend into the circle of this array under the guidance of the 7-pointed star, and observe the one who summons you. Please enjoy the offerings I provide for you, and obey my command. Whoosh! The room suddenly became very cold, as if arriving at a winter seaside, where the icy sea breeze froze every inch of skin. Immediately, a black mist appeared inside the summoning array, with 2 red eyes at the top of the mist, coldly observing Odysseus. At the same time, the gray mist covered the earthenware pot, taking the offerings Odysseus provided. This process greatly surprised Bernadette. Of course, she knew that the 7-pointed star belonged to a summoning array, but very few people used this array because setting up a simple altar was much more convenient than using this array, and the effect was not much different. However, Bernadette was very clear that evil spirits are some evil but not very powerful beings existing in the underworld, and spirit world would entice the caster to use the array to summon them, so that they could project more power into the real world. Bernadette felt that the fellow Odysseus summoned was an existence similar to an evil spirit, but strangely, the opponent's evil aura was only within the circle of the array, and outside the circle, apart from being a bit cold, there was nothing abnormal. Odysseus continued, Great Semensal, please help me capture 3 individuals who have committed heinous crimes but have not received appropriate punishment. Please take away their tongues and make their bodies stiff and immobile. The black mist suddenly vanished, and 6 or 7 seconds later, it returned, and 3 people flew out from the gray mist, a middle-aged man, a woman in her 30s, and an old man in his 60s. From their attire, they all appeared relatively wealthy, but at this moment, they stood there obediently, their bodies stiff and unable to move. There were no traces of mouths below their noses, just normal facial skin, as if they had never grown mouths or tongues. At this moment, they were looking at Odysseus with terrified eyes. Not a single mistake, one by one, everything in order. Odysseus again spoke to the black mist, Great Semensal, thank you for your help. We coexist peacefully, helping each other. I give you offerings, and you obey my command. Later, I will send these 3 evil souls into the circle. Please enjoy their flesh and souls. Now, Please leave the real world, leave this circle with the 7-pointed star. The gray mist indeed departed. Odysseus, while straightening the 3 stiff people, explained, Semensal is very skilled at distinguishing good from evil. These 3 must be extremely wicked individuals. Bernadette said, your method of finding experimental subjects is truly eye-opening. Then she pointed to the 7-pointed star array and asked, you've modified this summoning array in at least 16 places. After the modifications, the summoned entities won't be able to harm you anymore. Below angels, Odysseus placed a brass experimental item, somewhat resembling a helmet with several layers stacked together, onto the middle-aged man's head. Theoretically, except for summoning demons, people using summoning arrays shouldn't suffer any harm. After studying the currently common summoning arrays, I discovered that those arrays, in order to conform to classic array forms, actually have no mechanism whatsoever to protect the caster. So, I drastically altered that array, essentially transforming the power of the summoned into power that protects the caster. Additionally, one needs to prepare offerings that the summoned like, otherwise they won't be willing to help. As he spoke, he adjusted the experimental item. Now, the experiment begins. The middle-aged man had no idea what kind of experiment this was, nor could he beg for mercy. Only his expression and eyes still belonged to him, and at this moment, his face was filled with terror. Odysseus injected spirituality into the experimental item. The device activated smoothly, and a phantom ray of light emerged from the top of the helmet, quickly disappearing into the middle-aged man's head. Chapter 60 Instilling Knowledge. In the center of the brass helmet was an eye-catching crystal, making the helmet look somewhat like it had been struck by an arrow. That was the resonant note of spirituality in the magic array. If the crystal lit up, it meant the test subject's brainwaves were not in sync with the spiritual fluctuations. After the experiment began, since the central crystal did not light up, it indicated that the middle-aged man's brainwaves could resonate with a certain spiritual fluctuation within the helmet, allowing the infusion process to be completed immediately. The illusory light flashed, and the experiment concluded within a second. After a brief period of confusion, the middle-aged man, as the test subject, was instantly replaced by surprise as he perceived the new knowledge he had gained. Odysseus held the middle-aged man's hand, opening his spirit vision to observe the other party's spiritual body, mental body, and mind body, while simultaneously using his own spirituality to stimulate the spiritual circulation within the middle-aged man, then smiled and said, the experiment was successful. This was a method he had invented to test experimental results, based on his own research and utilizing his Beander abilities, which was more effective than any current detection instrument. Odysseus then conducted experiments on 2 other individuals. The old man among them failed to achieve resonance between his brainwaves and the spiritual fluctuations in the helmet, so Odysseus forcibly proceeded with the infusion. After the infusion, the other party clearly showed a pained expression, but after 3 minutes, he largely recovered and successfully completed the infusion process. Odysseus carried the 3 test subjects into the 7-pointed star magic array, then grabbed a handful of pitch-black powder from another porcelain jar and sprinkled it at their feet. These were spiritual Beander powders, which, by utilizing the residual aura of Semensal in the summoning array, could temporarily open the gate between the underworld and the real world. Semensal, who had been waiting in the underworld, immediately took away the 3 test subjects, who could only show expressions of terror, crying ceaselessly from fright, yet unable to scream. Odysseus carefully placed the helmet on the experimental table, a joyful smile on his face as he said, ha ha ha, it worked, it worked. Bernadette, who had been observing, began to ask, if I'm not mistaken, you just infused a certain amount of knowledge into the 3 test subjects, right? She was not unfamiliar with this process. A large portion of the Oravi Island members were Beyonders of the Mystery Prior Pathway, and Bernadette often witnessed the hidden sage chasing them to infuse knowledge. Odysseus's test subject certainly couldn't compare to the hidden sage's infusions, but the sensation felt somewhat similar. That's right. Odysseus smiled. What I infused into them was the mysticism knowledge and combat techniques from the melee scholar power. Although Bernadette had guessed the outcome, she was still somewhat surprised. No wonder you said this is an invention that can change the future. Since it can infuse knowledge from Beander characteristic, does that mean it can also infuse other knowledge? Not yet. To perform such an operation, I still need to improve it. Odysseus looked at his achievement and smiled. If I can find an excellent medium for storing knowledge, theoretically, any knowledge can be infused. This is somewhat similar to the language or certain knowledge-based charms produced by the God of Knowledge and Wisdom Church, except those charms are one-time use, while my test subjects can be reused. Theoretically, they only need regular maintenance to last for several years. Another difference Odysseus did not mention was that the god of knowledge and wisdom church's charms at least require praying to angels for power to be effective. However, Odysseus's research achievements did not require bothering deities at all. This was somewhat similar to the brain implant technology in his impression, but a technology that was still quite sci-fi before he transmigrated had now been achieved through mysticism pathways. Bernadette very seriously reminded Odysseus, this technology must never be made public, and it's best not to let others know its operating principles. I know. Odysseus smiled, I had already given it full consideration before this and understand your concerns. Knowledge can be infused, and so can memories, thereby causing a person to undergo immense changes. This change may not be positive, and some people with ulterior motives might manipulate others because of it. The queen mystic in the air hummed, it's good that you understand. To be precise, I have no intention of further research, Odysseus said, because continued research would be pointless. Bernadette's tone also relaxed, have you named this, helmet-like, test subject? Not yet. Odysseus found naming things the most annoying task. How about calling it the wisdom helmet? Odysseus readily agreed, good. Bernadette then asked a question about the summoning array. Semensal, whom you just summoned, seems to possess the power of a demigod. How could such an existence obey your command? I already mentioned this in the summoning incantation, Odysseus replied, we have a mutually beneficial relationship, he very much wishes to visit the real world. But with his own power, it's difficult for him to leave the underworld. My summoning him also allows him to get some fresh air. While fulfilling my commands, he can appear openly in the real world without too many restrictions. Moreover, no undead creature can refuse my offerings. Those are powders I concocted from spiritual materials like the other shore flower and undead grass, equivalent to delicious cakes in our eyes, the favorites of undead creatures. There are no dessert shops in the underworld. Evil spirits who cannot leave the spiritual world can only get this delicacy from me. He paused before saying with a touch of heartache, it cost me over £80 to concoct just one jar of this powder. However, overall, it was still very worthwhile, over £80 exchanged for 3 test subjects. Bernadette then said, I always feel that your summoning just now was not merely about simply commanding him. Odysseus smiled but did not continue to explain. Indeed, there were other uses. Odysseus had once had a deep conversation with Semensal, and when needed, they would have further cooperation. But that was one of Odysseus's trump cards. Although Bernadette had her suspicions, he would not elaborate. All right. Odysseus clapped his hands, I should prepare a delicious meal for myself. Do you want to? Just as he was speaking, his pocket watch suddenly lit up. That was a signal that an emergency had occurred at the Mysticism Research Society, usually meaning a society member had voluntarily sought help at the gathering place. Odysseus immediately pulled a long face, why did the signal come at this exact moment? He was already hungry. Sorry, I have something to attend to and can't continue chatting with you. What is it? I don't know either. Odysseus temporarily covered the wisdom helmet and took off his lab coat, preparing to return to Backland. Bernadette suddenly said, I'll take you. Chapter 61, The Leader Attacks. Bernadette had a strong premonition that if she participated in Odysseus's next endeavor, she would definitely gain something. So, she first went to Odysseus's suburban laboratory, and then, following the address Odysseus gave her, she first sent him to 77 Hilton Avenue. Odysseus knew that although Bernadette had appeared to leave just now, she was definitely still watching him. He did not shy away, going to the basement to put on the leader attire. He estimated that Bernadette already knew he was the leader, through her formless servant. Using the teleportation array in the basement, he arrived at 199 Heron Avenue. As soon as he reached the basement, he heard what sounded like a fight coming from the living room. Odysseus was slightly startled. It was the first time anyone had come knocking on his door with a fight. He drew his pistol and quickly went to the living room, seeing 5 intruders who had already subdued 2 servants and were fighting with a stranger. It looked like the stranger was also about to be subdued. Odysseus fired a shot into the ground near one of the intruders' feet. Whoosh! A small fireball ignited on the ground, then immediately extinguished because there was no flammable material. The sudden gunshot startled all 5 intruders. Odysseus pointed his gun at them. There are exactly 5 bullets left. Cape Town's subordinates had suddenly received an arrest order today and hadn't had time to bring their guns, so they slowly raised their hands. Odysseus said to the stranger, use their belts to tie their hands. The stranger immediately stepped forward, looking very skilled at this, and tied them up in a few swift motions. Odysseus continued to point his gun at the intruders and asked the servant, what's the matter that you sent me a signal? Based on the theory that spirituality exists in wave-like forms, and referencing the principles of communication equipment from before his transmigration, Odysseus invented a signal transmitter. When the servant pressed the button, Odysseus's modified pocket watch would light up. However, currently, it could only transmit such extremely simple signals and could not transmit information like voice or images, or even coded messages like telegrams. The two servants earlier had only been knocked to the ground. An intruder had cornered them against the wall, but they were not severely injured. At this moment, one held his stomach, and the other limped over. Just as they were about to report to the leader, the stranger already spoke first. "Hello, Mr. Leader, I am Beck, the assistant to Lion, and I'm here to ask for Lion's help." Odysseus looked at the stranger. Lion was captured by Cape Town's men. He thought to himself, when does Klein plan to act? Why hasn't Cape Town gotten his comeuppance yet? Yes. Beck breathed a sigh of relief. This saved him from having to explain. Odysseus thought for a second or two before handing the gun to one of the servants. "Watch them. Shoot anyone who makes a move." Then he told the other servant to call the police. Finally, he said to Beck, "Wait a moment, I'll go get some weapons." Seeing that the leader showed no hesitation, Beck finally breathed a sigh of relief. "Thank you for your help." Odysseus quickly went to the basement, opening the array he carried with him as he asked, "Are you still there?" A faint voice replied, "Yes." "That's good." Odysseus injected spirituality into the array and retrieved 7 cold weapons from the knowledge wilderness. He knew that Bernadette would definitely notice the special nature of this array, but at her level, she certainly wouldn't be able to tell that this array was related to the knowledge wilderness. Indeed, Bernadette said, "This space array is also very special." Of course, Odysseus pretended not to care much as he put away the array drawn on the cloth, then quickly went to the living room with the weapons and found a leather case to put them in. He called Beck, and the two of them took a hired carriage to the Backland Mechanical Research Society. In the carriage, Odysseus finally opened the leather case to inspect the 7 weapons: a sword, a saber, an exquisite metal crossbow with 20 exquisite arrows, 2 axes of different colors and not very large, a metal gauntlet, and an ebony cane. These were the weapons Odysseus had considered and believed would be useful in different situations. He did not bring the flamebolt because this time he intended to leverage the power of the machinery hivemind, and Marich had used that gun before. While inspecting the weapons, Odysseus asked Beck about the time Lion was captured and some other details. "We were about to find clues about the buyer." Beck recounted, "The buyer of the slaves is very mysterious. We have been investigating for a week, but we haven't found any clues yet. But during today's surveillance, Mr. Byron, that's Lion, he noticed something unusual in Theoslave warehouse, and believed that today they would definitely find out who the buyer was. However, we were discovered by the other party, even though we had been hiding so well and hadn't been discovered for so long." Odysseus glanced at Beck, whose expression was somewhat puzzled, and thought to himself, "It's very likely that you were discovered because the buyer sensed something unusual." Soon, the carriage arrived at the Backland Mechanical Research Society. Odysseus, holding his cane, told Beck to wait outside with the leather case containing the weapons. After entering the Backland Mechanical Research Society, Odysseus quickly found Max and explained the situation to him, then said, "I'd like to borrow a carriage from the machinery hivemind." "All right," Max said, "I'll send 2 men." Cape Town's reputation was not good throughout Backland, and the machinery hivemind was very willing to help with this. "No need," Odysseus refused. "I'll negotiate with Cape Town first. If that doesn't work, then you can step in." "All right, that way we both have room to maneuver." Max finished speaking and immediately sent someone to prepare a carriage. Boarding the carriage bearing the mechanical crest, Odysseus sat quietly inside the compartment, heading towards Cape Town's residence. Beck couldn't help but ask, "Mr. Leader, did you fail to find reinforcements just now?" "I found them," Odysseus said faintly. The mechanical crest on this carriage was the greatest reinforcement. Moreover, with Bernadette by his side, there would be no danger. But, Odysseus smiled, "Relax, the 3 of us are enough." Bernadette was startled and looked at Odysseus. 3 people. There were clearly only 2 people here. Did he even count the coachman? Were the coachmen of the Mechanical Research Society that powerful? Odysseus did not explain, simply closing his eyes to rest. The carriage traveled for about half an hour, arriving in front of a villa with an iron gate. This was Cape Town's residence. By then, it was already dark. Odysseus rubbed his stomach, which had long since growled with hunger, but he hadn't had time to eat. Several guards outside the gate stopped the carriage. Odysseus opened the window and said, "I want to see your boss, Cape Town." One guard, still somewhat politely, stepped forward and asked, "Sir, may I ask your name? Also, you need to remove your mask." Leader. Odysseus added, "I won't be taking off the mask." Leader. Never heard of him. The guard's attitude changed. "Take off your mask, and I'll help you report." Odysseus picked up his cane and handed the leather case to Beck. "I should have known not to waste words with them." He paused and then said, "You drive the carriage and follow behind later." Before Beck could react, Odysseus had already gotten out of the carriage. "Don't you know how to protect other people's privacy?" As he spoke, he kicked the guard from earlier, sending him flying into the iron gate. Chapter 62 Dinner at the Cave Family. The guard who was kicked away swore that when the masked man got out of the carriage, he was ready to fight at any moment. But the opponent's leg was too fast, he didn't react at all before he was kicked away. The guard's cries attracted the attention of passers-by. Immediately after, the passers-by left in a hurry, fearing that the fight there would affect them. Some people hid in a nearby alley, secretly watching Cape Town's subordinates get beaten. After one guard was kicked away, the other 4 guards immediately drew their short sticks and rushed over. Odysseus seized the opportunity and slammed forward, sending another guard flying. Then he used his cane to block the other guard's short sticks, and with his other hand, shaped like a claw, he struck a guard's chin, the violent impact directly knocking the opponent unconscious. Odysseus then used elbow and knee attacks to take down the other 2 guards. At this moment, Baker behind him also reacted, and the coachman had, very consciously, left the driving position, so Baker sat in the driver's seat. Odysseus turned to Baker and said, "Give me the knife." Baker quickly opened the leather case, found the knife inside, and handed it to the leader. A voice in his heart said, "It's too crazy, 2 people dare to break into Cape Town's headquarters. No, the leader actually dares to break into Cape Town's villa like this." Odysseus took the knife, quickly came to the iron gate, and swung the knife. The black painted iron gate was easily cut through in several places. Odysseus made several cuts, severing the inner bolt, then kicked the door open, casually tossing the knife backward, where it landed perfectly in the weapon box. With the iron gate open, Odysseus swaggered in. At this moment, the slightly plump Cape Town had just arrived at the dining room, his face bearing a gentle smile as he warmly greeted the 3 guests before him. "Miss Katie, tonight we have your favorite caviar and roasted spring chicken specially prepared for you." Katie, with an old scar on her face and wearing a thin shirt, said nothing, only nodding slightly. Immediately after, Harris, wearing a white wig and with a thin, stern face, entered the dining room, nodding slightly to each diner. This was the Beander leader sent by the royal family, a Sequence 6 judge. Parker, sitting at the lower end with an aged face, returned Harris's nod. When Harris sat down and unfolded his napkin, dinner officially began. At this time, the classical clock hanging in the hall had just reached 7:23. Bang bang. As the waiters began serving dishes, several gunshots rang out from outside. Cape Town was stunned for a moment, but Harris and the others continued to dine normally. A subordinate rushed in. "Boss." Cape Town tugged at his napkin. "How many times have I told you, call me sir, sir." "Okay, boss." The subordinate said urgently, "Strangers have broken in. They say they want to see you." Cape Town raised his eyelids and said, "Kill him, don't disturb our dinner." We are doing." The subordinate said, "But, it seems very difficult." Harris stopped his knife and fork, as if listening for a while, then said, "He's here for you, go handle it." His spirituality did not sense any threat, so he thought this should be a gang fight, and thus they did not intend to intervene. Cape Town nodded. "Yes, yes, yes." He threw down his napkin and immediately went to the corridor. Through the corridor window, Cape Town saw a young man wearing a mask, kicking his pet dog away. And not far behind the masked man, there was also a carriage that looked very important. Bang! One of Cape Town's subordinates fired a shot at the intruder, and a miraculous scene occurred. The masked man waved the cane in his hand, and the bullet was actually absorbed by his cane. Cape Town was not an ordinary human trafficker. He immediately realized that the other party might be a Beander. He quickly told his subordinate to inform Harris, "Tell Mr. Harris that a person with extraordinary abilities has arrived." Then Cape Town put on a smiling face. "Sir, I heard you were looking for me." Odysseus glanced at the plump figure in the corridor window and said, "Cape Town." Cape Town raised his hand, signaling his subordinates not to attack for now. "It's me. This afternoon, my person was taken by you." Odysseus said, "I'm here to get him back." The smile on Cape Town's face disappeared. "You're the leader. Byron's boss. Not a single mistake in every single detail." This afternoon, under Mr. Harris's guidance, a private detective was captured from the dock warehouse. Originally, Cape Town planned to kill the person with one shot, but then Byron shouted that he had already informed the leader. Cape Town had never heard of any leader, and was about to shoot, but was stopped by Harris, who was beside him. Mr. Harris knew the leader, who seemed to be a big shot, and killing his person would be troublesome, possibly even making the leader pay attention to their business. So Harris personally interrogated Byron, and after seeing that the other party had not grasped any key information, he told Cape Town to lock the person up, and when the leader came for him, to warn the leader, and then release the person. Odysseus, wearing a mask, smiled. I am the leader, but not his boss. At this moment, Parker came out of the dining room, and after hearing that the other party was the leader, he stood in the corridor, letting Cape Town handle it himself. Cape Town coughed a few times and sneered. Mr. Leader, curiosity can kill a cat. You shouldn't have sent someone to investigate my business. To be precise, Byron was not sent by me. Odysseus said. I only promised him that I would save his life. This answer surprised both Parker and Cape Town. Cape Town fiercely scratched his face with his fingers. Are you trying to quibble? Odysseus did not answer Cape Town's question, only saying, release him immediately. Parker, who had heard of the Mysticism Research Society, looked at the mechanical crest on the carriage and waved his hand at Cape Town, signaling to release the person, and then he also started coughing. Parker, of course, knew that the leader was from the Church of Steam and Machinery. Since the other party was not actively investigating Cape Town, he should quickly release the person to avoid trouble. Cape Town's face was already red from scratching, but he scratched harder and harder. Release him, cough cough. Soon, Byron, who was locked on the first floor, was brought out by two of Cape Town's subordinates. When the bruised and swollen Byron saw the leader's mask, he finally breathed a sigh of relief. At this moment, Parker, with a hoarse voice, pointed at Cape Town's face. Your face. It turned out that Cape Town's constant scratching had left his face covered in bloodstains, which quickly swelled up, and the epidermis became translucent, faintly revealing a pale yellow liquid inside. Clang clang clang. From the dining room, there was suddenly the sound of metal cutlery falling to the ground, and then it seemed to become chaotic inside. Parker, as if he had suddenly caught a cold, abruptly pulled out a gun and pointed it at the leader, asking in a hoarse voice, "What did you do to us?" Odysseus's brain quickly processed, and he immediately came to a conclusion. It can't be such a coincidence, can it? Is today the day Klein acts? Chapter 63, Fighting Alongside the Fool. At this moment, Odysseus analyzed the situation. Theoretically, Cape Town should have been in the restaurant, slowly dying under the effect of the poison vial. But the problem was, Cape Town was out now. After a slight hesitation, Odysseus immediately made a decision and said to Baker, "Throw the suitcase to me. You two leave quickly." Bang! Parker fired a shot, hitting the ground in the yard. None of you move. At this time, he still didn't want to fight with the machinery hivemind, so he only shot at the ground. Odysseus stared at him coldly, and at the same time saw Cape Town, who had not yet lost his ability to move, leaving with the support of his subordinates. Baker boldly threw the suitcase over. Bang! Parker fired another shot, this time at Baker. But he hadn't seen the leaders fight with Cape Town's subordinates just now, otherwise he would have known that his pistol had no deterrent effect. Odysseus's cane was also a Beander weapon. When spirituality was injected, it could generate a huge magnetic force within 1 or 2 seconds, attracting surrounding bullets and metal weapons. This was also why Odysseus handed other weapons to Baker for safekeeping. Baker scrambled out of the driver's seat, pulled Byron, and quickly walked away. At this moment, a phantom wearing majestic black armor and a dark crown on his head floated out of the restaurant. That was Klein. However, only by opening spirit vision could this figure be seen. Originally, his plan was going smoothly, but just as the poison from the poison vial was about to take effect, Cape Town suddenly left the restaurant. His main goal in this operation was still to kill Cape Town, so he chased him out. Imprisonment. The area around Klein became viscous, as if forming a giant amber. He floated in midair, unable to move. Harris, who followed out, temporarily blocked the black figure in front of him. Immediately after, Katie, who chased out, raised her gun and pulled the trigger. A light golden bullet with strange patterns penetrated the viscous space and hit the black figure. Snap! The black figure ignited spontaneously without wind, turning out to be a crudely cut paper man. Although Klein was not injured, he was held back by these two mid-sequence Beyonders. At the same time, seeing that his gun was useless, Parker quickly broke through the window and rushed towards Odysseus. He realized that the situation was unclear, and he needed to first entangle the leader. After Hera's and their problem was resolved, he would then consider how to deal with this leader. Odysseus had already made a decision, to help Klein and kill Cape Town. So, as Parker rushed over, he quickly took out the weapons from the suitcase, strapped 2 axes to his lower back, tucked a sword and a knife on his left and right sides respectively, put on his gauntlets, and took out a metal crossbow. First, he shot an arrow at Parker, who was already close by. Parker was a sheriff. He felt that this arrow was very sharp and dodged it nimbly. This crossbow was also a Beander weapon. The arrows it fired were as powerful as rifle bullets, and its accuracy was extremely high. Even someone who had never used a crossbow could hit a target 20 or 30 meters away. Odysseus took this opportunity to shoot 2 arrows at Cape Town's direction at the fastest speed. These 2 arrows passed through the glass with a whistling sound. One arrow pierced Cape Town's head, and the other hit his shoulder. Thus ended the life of this human trafficker. Byron and his assistant, Baker, hadn't gone far and were watching the battle from outside the Black Iron Gate. It was Byron's first time seeing the leader in action, and he didn't expect him to kill Cape Town so cleanly and swiftly. This sudden turn of events also stunned Klein and Harris. Klein only then saw Odysseus in the yard, and for a moment, he felt that the person in front of him was very familiar, a little like Mr. Gale, whom he had seen at the Nanmu ballroom. But after only a brief pause, their battle continued. Klein had to defeat these 2 people in front of him to release the girls in the basement. In the yard, Odysseus used the strap on the crossbow to hang it on his back, then put the arrows into his pocket, and then swung his gauntleted fist violently, striking at Parker, who had already arrived nearby. Beyonders of the Arbiter pathway were all very skilled in combat. Parker was no exception. He nimbly dodged Odysseus's attack, and at the same time, his figure seemed to grow much taller, giving off a great sense of oppression. Odysseus felt some difficulty with Parker's attacks. Every punch he threw was met with an inexplicable resistance, a resistance that seemed to come from within, always making one feel that the person in front of them could not be offended, and that everything he did was correct. This was the opponent's Beander ability, which greatly reduced Odysseus's combat skills. Parker, however, took the opportunity to launch an attack, forcing Odysseus to retreat repeatedly. Odysseus had no choice but to draw his knife to defend himself. Parker also drew his dagger. Odysseus's mouth twitched slightly, the opponent had fallen for it. He slashed at Parker, who parried with his dagger, intending to block the opponent's knife. Who knew that this knife was incredibly sharp? It directly cut off Parker's dagger, and along with half a dagger, Parker's arm holding the dagger flew out. Parker looked at the weapon in Odysseus's hand with disbelief. This was, of course, also a Beander weapon, whose ability was extreme sharpness, cutting through metal like mud. Parker's disadvantage was due to insufficient information. If he had seen Odysseus breaking in earlier, he would not have used his dagger to block the opponent's knife. While the opponent was stunned, Odysseus quickly drew his knife back, slit the opponent's throat, and kicked him into the villa's corridor. At this moment, the fierce battle in the corridor was still ongoing. Parker, who had smashed through the glass and fallen to the ground convulsing, stunned both Harris and Katie. Immediately after, they saw the leader throw an axe inscribed with fiery red mystical symbols and patterns into the corridor. This axe was thrown at Katie, but Katie deftly dodged it. Just as Harris was considering whether to negotiate with the leader, his spirituality sensed immense danger. The source of that danger was the axe that hadn't harmed Katie and had fallen to the ground. In fact, Harris had felt the danger of this axe from the very beginning, but after all, it was a weapon used by the enemy for attack, so it was bound to be dangerous. But as the axe was about to land, the danger signal grew stronger and stronger. XE. Boom. Harris's exile was still a step too late. The axe was like a bomb with a huge yield. A violent explosion filled the entire corridor, shattering all the glass in the corridor. Half of the wall collapsed. Harris and Katie were both blown away, which greatly surprised Harris, who had served in the military, because even artillery shells didn't have such power. The flames of the explosion quickly dissipated. Katie was hit in the head and chest by fragments of the axe, and blood gushed from her severely burned body. Harris, having been prepared, avoided vital areas. Although his clothes and hair were also on fire, he rolled over the moment he landed and immediately escaped towards the back door. Chapter 64, The Importance of Last Hit. Additional chapter for everyone's recommendation votes. Odysseus's 2 axes weren't for chopping people, but for blowing them up. The explosion array drawn on them, improved by him, was more powerful than any hand grenade, and even more powerful than any current cannonball. He had considered making them in the shape of long-handled grenades, but this explosion array required a certain flat surface, and making them round would be very unstable. So he simply made them into the shape of axes. The violent explosion could shatter the metal axe heads, and the shrapnel shot out might not even be withstood by zombies. Sequence 7 interrogator, Katie, was directly blown to death by this attack, and Harris was also in a sorry state, turning around and fleeing. Of course, such an effect was mainly due to the element of surprise, otherwise, such a thing could not have been thrown near Harris and Katie at all. Because this weapon caused too much commotion, even if Odysseus was an informant for machinery hivemind, he wouldn't dare use such a thing normally. But today it didn't matter. When the official Beyonders investigated, he could just blame all of this on Black Emperor. Boom. Just as Harris ran into the restaurant, another violent explosion occurred. This was Klein's earlier arrangement. Starting a few minutes ago, he had damaged the gas pipes in the restaurant, allowing the room to fill with gas. When the explosion in the corridor happened earlier, because the restaurant door was closed and there were no windows facing the corridor, the gas inside was not ignited. When Harris escaped to the restaurant entrance, Klein, existing in spirit form, snapped his fingers, igniting the gas in the restaurant. The violent explosion blew Harris all the way into the yard. 2 consecutive violent explosions collapsed about 1/3 of Cape Town's villa. At this moment, Harris was charred all over, severely burned. The side of his body facing the restaurant was riddled with large and small wooden splinters, and a chair leg was sticking out of his back. But he was only severely wounded and could still run quickly. So Odysseus pulled out the blue axe from his waist, injected spirituality into it, and threw it towards Harris. The axe still didn't hit Harris, but at the moment it landed, the blue axe emitted a soft thump. The surrounding area within 4 or 5 meters was completely covered in solid ice, even freezing Harris's 2 legs. This judge fell to the ground like an ice sculpture. The red axe was a high-yield bomb, the blue axe was an ice bomb, and Odysseus didn't bring the white and black axes today, which were his developed, light explosion bomb, and blackout bomb. Klein, wearing illusory black armor, immediately followed up, reaching out and going, bang 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 bang, at Harris. The air bullets were continuous, hitting Harris's body like a machine gun. Beyonders of the Arbiter pathway are not known for their defense. Although the potion made his physique strong, he couldn't withstand Klein's continuous attacks, and soon this judge also stopped breathing. Klein, existing in spirit form, glanced at the young man wearing a mask in the yard, who he suspected was Mr. Gale. Their cooperation just now was very tacit, and their attacks were quite unexpected, otherwise, this judge would never have died here. The 2 of them didn't have any communication, nor was any communication needed at this time. Klein, according to his plan, flew towards the entrance of the underground area. Odysseus, meanwhile, took down his exquisite metal crossbow and loaded it with equally exquisite metal arrows. These metal arrows also had small wind element arrays on them, which could help them shoot further. In the underground area, the bearded Bellis had been paying attention to the commotion outside, but he dared not leave his post, fearing that the intruder's accomplices would break into the dungeon. He had long activated his spirit vision, so Klein's majestic figure was detected by him as soon as he entered the underground. Bellis immediately raised his high-pressure steam rifle and pulled the trigger. Bang! White mist spewed from the barrel, and a sharp, pale golden bullet shot forward at an astonishing speed. Klein had known about the opponent's equipment for a long time, so his illusory figure tilted, dodging the dangerous bullet. At the same time, Bellis rushed out of the guardroom, holding the high-pressure steam rifle in a threatening posture, while moving quickly towards the main door. He believed that the intruder who could deal with Harris, Katie, and Parker combined could certainly easily kill him too. Moreover, such a big commotion just now would definitely attract attention, and he believed that the mandated punishers would certainly come to investigate quickly, so he chose to flee and quickly rendezvous with the mandated punishers' members. Klein let out another invisible shriek, making the opponent feel as if he had been hit by a sledgehammer, seeing stars, and a few drops of blood flowing from his nose. But this did not stop Bellis from fleeing. He scrambled and crawled towards the door, struggled to open it, and as he reached the ground, he revealed a smile of someone who had narrowly escaped death. But at this moment, he saw a young man wearing a mask not far away, aiming an exquisite metal crossbow at him. The undead shriek Klein had just emitted meant Bellis's mind hadn't fully recovered. He dodged almost instinctively, but it was still a step too late. The first arrow shot by the prepared Odysseus hit his left eye squarely, followed by the second and third arrows, all hitting vital points. Odysseus, before the people from underground could come out, dragged the still twitching Bellis aside, then gathered all 4 Beyonder corpses. Soon, kidnapped girls ran out from underground. They saw the collapsed and burning villa, and in front of the villa, the mysterious masked figure covered in many weapons. In their panic, they continued to flee until they reached the main street. They looked back again, and this time, besides the mysterious masked figure, a majestic figure in full black armor and a dark crown stood on the rooftop. Every word, every sentence, every paragraph, every piece of content is here. The girls remembered this scene and quickly headed to a nearby church. In the courtyard of Cape Town's villa, the fire grew larger and larger, making Odysseus cough repeatedly. But he endured it, not leaving immediately, because the thick smoke obscured the surrounding vision, which was a good time to divide the spoils. Odysseus took the iron-black glove from Hera's hand. His spirituality told him that this was definitely a good magical item. Then Klein also came down from the rooftop. The two of them tacitly divided the spoils. Klein used the characteristics of Azek's copper whistle to extract the Beander characteristic in advance. Although Klein contributed more to this battle, Odysseus's surprise attack was a great help. Otherwise, Klein alone certainly couldn't have killed 3 mid-sequence Beanders. So regarding the spoils, Odysseus chose first, and Klein had no objections. After taking the glove, Odysseus also took Belis's Beander characteristic and the steam rifle. Klein, meanwhile, collected the other 3 Beander characteristics. After quickly dividing the spoils, Klein politely bowed to Odysseus, then went to look for Cape Town's body. Odysseus was already tearing up from choking. He persisted in taking out the array he carried with him, put the spoils into the knowledge wilderness, then threw the sheet with the array drawn on it into the fire. After watching the array begin to burn, he quickly retreated to the main entrance. Byron and Baker quickly came forward. Leader. Odysseus coughed twice, his voice hoarse. I'm fine. At this moment, he saw an illusory door suddenly crack open in the courtyard. Odysseus thought to himself, the demigods have arrived. Thank you all for your recommendation votes, adding an extra chapter to show my appreciation. Hollow down pointing triangle, boo. Chapter 65 God's Shield. Meanwhile, Klein found Cape Town's body, took out a deck of tarot cards he had prepared earlier, pulled out the Judgment and the Emperor cards and threw them on Cape Town's face, then scattered the other tarot cards over Cape Town's body. As he scattered them, one card, due to the angle of its fall, tumbled and landed on the ground near Cape Town's head. It was the Hermit card, depicting a figure in a hooded cloak holding a lantern. Klein didn't pay much attention to it and went to the rooftop, preparing for his final curtain call. At this moment, a phantom gate suddenly appeared in the villa's courtyard, and a handsome man in a sharp suit stepped out from the illusory world within the gate. This was Celt Augustus, a demigod from the Loan military. He glanced at the raging fire before him, his gaze piercing through the flames and thick smoke to see the 4 Beander corpses already engulfed by the fire. Simultaneously, a gust of wind blew, and a solemn elderly man wearing a black soft hat and a black robe embroidered with the Storm Church's symbol flew in at an extremely fast speed. He was Ace Snake, the Archbishop of the Backland Suburbs, the Singer of God. Ace asked Celt in a deep voice, "Why are you here?" According to custom, Beander incidents in the Cherwood Borough fall under the jurisdiction of the Holy Wind Cathedral. Celt replied with a grim expression, "I live nearby." Ace said no more, and with a raised hand towards the fierce flames, a violent hurricane actually swept the fire away, sending it towards the artificial fountain outside. The 2 demigods saw the bodies of Hera's and the other 3, saw Cape Town covered in scattered tarot cards, and the 2 cards covering the face of this human trafficker. They were the Judgment card, showing an angel blowing a horn, and the Emperor card, depicting a figure in armor wearing a crown. Immediately after, Celt and Ace simultaneously sensed something and looked up at the roof. They discovered a majestic figure covered in black armor and wearing a black crown on the partially collapsed roof of the villa. Klein nodded slightly. Having completed his curtain call, he was about to leave when a phantom female voice suddenly came from behind him. "Got you." Klein immediately reacted, realizing the voice came from the powerful lady he had seen at the Kingdom Museum earlier. At the same time, a colorful halo suddenly appeared beneath his feet, trapping him in place. After Bernadette saw this majestic figure with Odysseus, she immediately sensed that this was the same spirit body that had stolen the card before. Because of the previous lesson, she did not rush to make a move. Instead, while observing the opponent's actions, she quietly created a powerful spatial seal. Klein's figure paused slightly, but in the next second, he vanished without a trace. A phantom figure immediately appeared where he had vanished. It was Bernadette, who was somewhat incredulously checking her seal. The seal was still there, with no signs of being broken free. Theoretically, the person inside this seal should not have been able to leave through the spirit world, the underworld, or the astral world, yet the opponent had indeed left right before Bernadette's eyes. Crack! A tree branch-shaped silvery white lightning flashed in midair, illuminating the area where the majestic figure had just disappeared as if it were daytime. Bernadette glanced at the two demigods in the courtyard, and a pair of phantom wings appeared on her back, enveloping her. When the phantom wings disappeared, Bernadette also left. Ace and Celt both felt Bernadette's power, so neither of them had any intention of stopping her. Celt said, "They are not accomplices." Ace nodded, he could feel how powerful that seal was. Then, both of them simultaneously looked outside the villa, towards the carriage with the mechanical crest. Odysseus, who was coughing repeatedly and feeling very uncomfortable, immediately asked Byron and Beck to help him onto the machinery hivemind's carriage when he saw Klein's curtain call, and warned Byron and Beck that no one was allowed to get off the carriage. Just as Odysseus started to feel a little better, Ace and Celt had already arrived outside the carriage. A gust of wind, as if alive, opened the carriage door, and Odysseus took a deep breath before saying, "Excuse me, gentlemen, cough cough, I'm a bit unwell and unable to greet you properly." Ace said, "You seem to be witnesses to this entire incident." "Yes, cough cough." Odysseus had no intention of concealing anything, "but I am an important informant for the machinery hivemind. I can only answer your cough cough, your inquiries with the machinery hivemind's team members present." This was why he immediately got into the carriage. If he hadn't gotten in, even if he had revealed his identity, the two demigods before him could have simply pretended not to hear clearly and forcibly interrogated Odysseus and the other two. With Celt, an arbiter pathway Beander, present, their interrogation would not be a simple questioning. But if someone sitting inside the machinery hivemind's carriage were to be interrogated, using Beander abilities by the Archbishop of the Storm Church and a military demigod, it would be utterly indefensible. Celt sneered, "Are you feeling guilty?" Odysseus and the other two felt immense mental pressure, as if they were about to reveal all their secrets at that moment. Cough cough cough. Odysseus coughed while enduring the immense mental pressure, trembling as he took out the mechanical crest hanging around his neck, composed of a triangular ruler, gears, and levers, and held it before him. Incarnation of essence, cough cough, guardian of artisans, radiance of technology. Your devout believer prays to you. Enough. Celt said coldly, "We'll ask later." Clang. The carriage door was reclosed, and the immense mental pressure vanished. Odysseus let out a long sigh of relief. Byron, standing beside him, gained a new understanding of the leader's identity. He asked, "How should we answer the police and Beyonders' questions later?" Although Byron was not a Beander, he knew of their existence. "Just tell the truth," Odysseus said. He had reported Byron's matter to Max during the recovery last Saturday, and Parker had actively attacked him earlier, so he was not afraid of normal inquiries. However, he knew too many secrets and could not be interrogated by military personnel using Beander abilities. Subsequently, the mandated Punishers team arrived one after another. They directed the police to control the villa and its surrounding area, and 3 of their members kept watch over Odysseus and the others. More than half an hour later, Max arrived with his team members after hearing the news. After understanding the specific situation, he asked the mandated Punishers to send someone to accompany them back to the Backland Mechanical Research Society to jointly interrogate Odysseus and the other two. However, the mandated Punishers and the military's pay attention to of this case exceeded Max's expectations. Sultan Ace actually personally participated in the interrogation of Odysseus and the other two. Chapter 66 The Black Emperor. After returning to the Backland Mechanical Research Society, Odysseus, accompanied by Max, recounted his experience in full. He had gone to Cape Town's place to retrieve someone and coincidentally encountered an attack from a majestic figure. Parker was the first to attack him, and he had no choice but to retaliate, which led to a conflict with Cape Town and the Beyonders in his villa. In a sense, this was indeed the truth, and Odysseus had previously reported it to Machinery Hivemind. Celt used his Beander characteristic to determine that Odysseus was telling the complete truth. It wasn't until Archbishop Horamek Haydn, looking benevolent and dressed in a white priest's robe, arrived that the mandated Punishers and the military realized the Church of Steam and Machinery's pay attention to of Odysseus. Ekenzer Bernard, a senior deacon of Machinery Hivemind, immediately went to invite Archbishop Horamek after hearing that both the military and the mandated Punishers had demigods inquiring about the case. Horamek rushed over as soon as he learned that the Church's Ace intelligence officer was involved in a Beander case. Upon meeting Archbishop Ace of the Storm Church and the military's demigod Celt, Horamek first exchanged a few pleasantries with them, then brought up the wealthy Blair case that had caused a stir in the Beander world a few days prior. He stated that thanks to Odysseus providing crucial clues, Machinery Hivemind was able to solve the case without any of the official Beyonders noticing. Ace and Selt both understood Horamik's meaning. I personally vouch for this person. This was also understandable, they would also try their best to protect such an excellent intelligence officer. So, after learning that Odysseus was forced into this case, Ace stopped asking any further questions. Selt, after learning that Byron's investigation only found evidence of Cape Town's crimes but no other information, such as the buyers of the slaves, only symbolically asked Odysseus, "Then why did you seem a bit guilty when we were at the entrance of Cape Town's villa earlier, and didn't immediately explain what you knew about the case to us?" "Because I've heard of the damage caused by mental whip," Odysseus said with a helpless smile. "It's said to cause permanent damage, so I was very reluctant to undergo your interrogation." Selt smiled and didn't ask any more questions. Once the two demigods showed less concern, the remaining questions were basically routine inquiries. As for questions like where the Beander characteristics of Hera's and others went, Odysseus claimed not to know and speculated that they might have been taken away by that majestic figure. After seeing off the military and the mandated punishers, Odysseus, who was no longer in any serious danger, stood up and bowed to Horamik, saying, "Archbishop, thank you for your protection." Without the demigod's guarantee, even under the protection of machinery hivemind, his interrogation would not have ended so quickly. Horamik sat in his chair and asked with a smile, "Do you have anything to tell me?" Odysseus smiled and said, "I knew my little trick wouldn't escape your eyes." Then he put away his smile and said, "I voluntarily shot Cape Town because his disregard for life was outrageous. And after learning that the majestic figure's purpose was to free the kidnapped girls, I actively offered some help." Horamik said indifferently, "This is human nature." Odysseus then added, "The four dead Beyonders were all arbiters, and the military also seemed overly concerned with this matter." Mr. Selt seemed to say that he appeared at the scene immediately because he lived nearby, but some information I inadvertently learned indicates that he has 4 properties in Backland, and we don't know if he was living in Sherwood Borough today. Horamik straightened up from the backrest and looked at Odysseus. "What are you trying to say?" "The military seems to be plotting something," Odysseus said seriously. "I have no evidence, just a gut feeling." Horamik and Ekinzer and the others fell silent. After a long while, Horamik spoke again, "Pay attention to information in this area, but don't actively investigate." Odysseus immediately said, "Yes." After Archbishop Horamik also left, Ekinzer said to Odysseus, "You will stay here tonight, sleep in the lounge. You should be familiar with the case investigation procedures, you need to be on call throughout the investigation of this case." In other words, in the eyes of machinery hivemind, this young man Odysseus had no problems at all. However, he still had to put on a show and cooperate with the investigation. Odysseus nodded. "Okay." Immediately, he said to his good friend Max, "Get me something to eat. I was doing experiments in the mountains today and didn't even eat lunch." Above the gray mist, the fool Klein, sitting at the head of the ancient bronze long table, let out a long sigh of relief. "That scared me to death." He hadn't expected that mysterious lady he met at the Kingdom Museum to quietly sneak up behind him and then prepare a very powerful seal for him. Without the help of the above the gray fog, he probably wouldn't have made it back today. Theoretically, he returned to the spirit world, but the way was not by opening a passage to the spirit world and then returning to the above the gray fog. Instead, the power of the above the gray fog opened a door in the real world and brought him back, which is why that powerful seal had no effect. Every single one of them was perfect. Then a somewhat tired Klein used the citrine pendant to perform a divination. "Tonight's masked youth is Mr. Gale. Tonight's masked youth is Mr. Gale." After silently repeating it 7 times, the citrine pendant rotated clockwise. "It really is Mr. Gale." Klein then thought of the powerful battle axe. "Does Mr. Gale also deal in firearms?" No, that's not the point. The point is, hiss. The battle just now consumed too much spirituality, giving Klein a splitting headache. He had to quickly return to the real world to rest and think about this problem when he had time. The next morning, Empress Borough, inside Count Hall's luxurious villa. Audrey was waiting for the maid to cut the food when she suddenly heard Count Hall, who habitually read the newspaper at breakfast, let out a laugh. "Cape Town is dead." "Who is he?" Audrey asked. "A wealthy man who might secretly be a human trafficker," Count Hall chuckled. "He was killed last night, and all newspapers reported the killer is the Black Emperor." The Black Emperor, Black Emperor. Black Emperor. Audrey immediately thought of the blasphemy card belonging to Mr. Fool. She instantly became interested in Cape Town's murder case. "That sounds very interesting. Although it's illegal, I want to say that the Black Emperor did a beautiful job." "Father, what about the process?" "It's still under investigation," Count Hall said, taking a sip of tea. But someone saw a masked young man break into Cape Town's villa before Cape Town was killed. Chapter 67 Investigating the Leader. Audrey could already imagine the scene. A black emperor, representing justice, single-handedly breaking into Cape Town's evil lair. At the same time, she couldn't help but wonder, is that black emperor a favored one of Mr. Fool? Count Hall continued while eating breakfast. The Black Emperor entered Cape Town's villa and not only stole all the valuables from the safe but also stole the lives of Cape Town and his wicked subordinates, rescuing the young girls imprisoned in the dungeon. He scattered tarot cards all over Cape Town's body, most prominently the Judgment card and the Emperor card on his face, and a single Hermit card that had fallen to the ground. Tarot cards. Audrey's eyes suddenly lit up. I'm not very clear about the Judgment card and the Emperor card, but I do know there's a Mr. whose code name is Hermit. At the same time, Zio saw the emergency meeting sign left by the Golden Masked Man. Zio immediately went to the agreed meeting place, a secluded yet accessible alley. The Golden Masked Man was still wearing a black tuxedo, his light brown eyes sweeping over Zio's head. I have a task for you. Zio asked concisely, difficulty and reward. The initial reward is £30. If you can get useful intelligence, I can even directly give you a Beander material corresponding to a sheriff. Such a generous reward made Zio frown instead. What task? The man wearing the golden mask said, you should know Cape Town, right? Zio's brows furrowed even deeper. Cape Town. That human trafficker. The Golden Masked Man nodded. Yes. I refuse this task, I really dislike him. Zio immediately rejected it. It's not working for Cape Town. The man chuckled and said, because he's already dead. Zio was momentarily stunned. Dead. Dead. The man affirmed, he died in his own home, covered in tarot cards. There were two on his face, one, Judgment, and one, Emperor. It said the Hermit card was also very prominent. Then he added, oh, by the way, keep an eye out for any incidents involving tarot cards in recent years that haven't been reported to the police department. Zio considered it for a moment and then said, all right, I accept this task. There's also a long-term task. The Golden Masked Man continued, as far as I know, you can participate in the Mysticism Research Society. Zio immediately became wary. Who told you that? Don't be so nervous, we have people in the Research Society. The other party briefly explained and then said, this long-term task is to monitor, leader. Each report of the general content of the gathering can earn a £5 reward. If you know how he left the venue, I can apply for a £300 reward for you. Currently, the MI9 members in the Research Society haven't figured this out yet. Zio hesitated for a moment before saying, I'll think about it. Then she asked, why investigate, leader? Since you already have your people in the Research Society, why do you still need my monitoring? Because, leader, appeared at the crime scene yesterday, and he killed at least one of Cape Town's subordinates. Zio was very surprised. She hadn't expected, leader, to be involved. I wonder what role he played in it. Then she recalled Byron's description at the last gathering, where, leader, had promised to protect Byron's life. She never expected that it was by killing Cape Town that Byron's safety was protected. The Masked Man continued, as for your monitoring, it's an insurance. Leader, is a person with great charisma. I'm afraid our people might conceal some crucial details. Zio thought for a moment before saying, sorry, I'm not very willing to accept this task. To be honest, she admired, leader, somewhat for daring to attack Cape Town proactively. It's all right. The Golden Masked Man smiled. As we agreed before, you have the right to choose tasks. After bidding farewell to the Masked Man, Zio bought a newspaper nearby and hurried back to the rental apartment she shared with Furs. Furs had just finalized the beginning of her new book and was in a good mood, preparing to reward herself with a cigarette. Just then, Zio pushed open the door and entered the study. Zio stared at the unlit cigarette in the other's hand. Smoking is harmful to health. Furs didn't argue but instead asked, why are you back so early today? Do you remember Cape Town, whom we talked about a few days ago? Of course, I remember, Furs replied. Your friend Byron seems to be investigating that human trafficker. Zio scratched her frizzy blonde hair. He's dead. Byron. I knew it. No mistake. One by one, one by one, one by one, one by one. Cape Town is dead. Zio corrected. Furs was slightly surprised at first, then said, that villain finally got the punishment he deserved. Then she asked, how did he die? That person didn't describe it in detail, but I bought a newspaper on the way back, and it said he was killed by the Black Emperor. As she spoke, Zio handed the newspaper to her friend. What Black Emperor? Furs didn't quite believe the content of the newspaper, but when she saw the tarot cards appearing inside, she suddenly paused and immediately thought of the tarot club. She thought to herself, it couldn't be one of our members, could it? But there's no member with the code name, Emperor. If it really is, this is the first time I've discovered traces of the tarot club in the real world. While Furs was musing, Zio added, what surprised me was that, leader of the Mysticism Research Society was also involved. What? Zio's words immediately pulled Furs back from the tarot club to reality. Zio said, that masked man said that, leader, also appeared at the scene and killed at least one of Cape Town's subordinates. Furs pointed to the newspaper, then what's the connection between, leader, and the Black Emperor? I didn't ask about that. Because it would likely involve some rather secret intelligence, and if she had asked, Zio would have found it difficult to refuse the masked man's task. She said, but I expect to get the answer at the next gathering. Odysseus, wearing a mask, took the machinery hivemind carriage to 199 Heron Avenue, the location of the Mysticism Research Society. He retrieved the flame bolt from the waiter and told the two waiters that he would give them double pay this week. The two waiters, who were somewhat frightened and looking troubled, immediately beamed with joy. Odysseus then had one of the waiters place an advertisement in the Backland Post, informing the members of the Mysticism Research Society about the meeting tomorrow. Next, Odysseus used the teleportation array in the basement to leave. As soon as he emerged from the spirit world, Odysseus saw Bernadette sitting on a chair in the basement. Upon seeing Odysseus, she immediately asked, who is that so-called Black Emperor? Sorry, this chapter has been modified with some content, so it's a bit late. Chapter 68. The potion finally begins to digest. Odysseus heard Bernadette's question and smiled somewhat helplessly. Yesterday, I never left your sight, so you should have a clear judgment that everything I encountered was purely accidental. This answer was cunning. He didn't say, I don't know, or, I'm not sure, but instead described what happened yesterday. He was telling the truth, his nose certainly hadn't grown longer. However, Odysseus didn't explicitly say, I don't know who Black Emperor is, because he not only knew who Black Emperor was but also knew all the details about him, including that he had a sister who liked to study machinery. Bernadette furrowed her somewhat heroic brows. I can sense that Black Emperor is the same person who stole the bookmark from the Kingdom Museum earlier. Within a month, you've met him twice in a row. From a mystical perspective, this is very unusual. Odysseus was slightly stunned. He hadn't thought of that angle, but he immediately had a response. Have you ever considered that you might have some connection with him? He took off his mask, revealing a rather handsome face. Theoretically, I'm just a low-sequence Beander. The connection between you and him should be greater than the connection between me and him, right? Bernadette slowly nodded. That's true. Odysseus simply changed the subject, feigning impatience. Yesterday, I was interrogated all night. I didn't expect you to interrogate me as soon as we met. And I even risked my neck to get information about the bookmark for you yesterday. Bernadette came back to her senses and said with a slight smile, my apologies, I just had some questions. Then she asked, what information did you find out? Treat me to lunch. No problem, Bernadette said immediately. It's said to be a special item left behind by Emperor Russell, Odysseus said, deliberating. And it has anti-divination abilities. It also seems to require a special activation incantation. Normally, it's just an ordinary bookmark, but once activated, it seems to record some very important information. Activation incantation. Bernadette immediately recalled the two oddly pronounced symbols her father had taught her. Odysseus took off the hooded cloak worn by leader, and waited quietly for more than 10 seconds before Bernadette came back to her senses. Sorry, I was thinking about something else. She forced a smile. Where are we having lunch? Nanmu Ballroom, I suppose. Okay, see you at noon. See you at noon. After confirming the time and place for lunch, Bernadette was once again covered by two huge wings and finally disappeared into the basement. It was clear that the conversation just now had made Bernadette recall her father. Odysseus took a deep breath, tidied his clothes in front of the mirror, then left the basement, which was 77 Hilton Avenue, and took a horse-drawn carriage back to the herb shop. Cain had long grown accustomed to Odysseus not coming to the shop for a few days occasionally. The herb shop was running normally under his care. He dusted as he spoke. Mr. Simon came by and said there's a match on Sunday evening. He'll come back tomorrow afternoon to report the news he's gathered to you. Odysseus nodded. He picked up the newspaper and glanced at it. When he saw the report about Black Emperor stealing all of Cape Town's belongings, he smiled slightly. He had thought about the safe at the time. If he could find the safe and throw it directly into the knowledge wilderness, he would be rich. But at that time, the villa was on fire, and it was difficult to go to places like the study to look for the safe. Moreover, an official Beander demigod could arrive at any time, so there was no time to look for the safe. Finally, Odysseus sighed inwardly, what a pity. So much money, all for the benefit of the Backland police. There was nothing else to do today, so Odysseus rested for a bit. He first used the teleportation array to go to the suburban laboratory and put the wisdom helmet into the knowledge wilderness. Then he tidied up the laboratory, and by then, the teleportation array's 1 hour, cooldown time, had passed. Back at the herb shop, Odysseus paced in front of the desk in the lounge, thinking about writing the fighting outline. After a long while of contemplation, he finally began to write, starting with a description of fighting and the general outline of the entire book. Here, he drew upon some theories from Chinese Kung Fu, clarifying that the essence of fighting is first and foremost to strengthen the body, prevent harm to oneself or family, and when help is needed, to punish the evil deeds of others, promoting the meaning of kindness, and not advocating fighting or brawling. After writing thousands of words, Odysseus felt that the potion in his body showed signs of loosening. He smiled slightly, his previous idea was correct. No matter how a melee scholar fights, they must eventually summarize and research. If they can have their own unique insights into fighting, they will definitely be able to digest the potion. He then began to elaborate on some basic theories of fighting and the description of force points. As soon as this general outline was halfway written, Odysseus already clearly felt the digestion of the potion. Just as he was feeling pleased, a voice suddenly sounded behind him, "It's been many years since anyone dared to stand me up. Every word, every sentence, every detail is perfect." Oops. Odysseus quickly took out his pocket watch. It was already past 1 in the afternoon. My apologies, I was too engrossed in writing just now. Bring what you've written. Odysseus quickly picked up the half-finished draft he had just written. Suddenly, a phantom, pumpkin-shaped carriage appeared before him. 2 stout, mouse-headed horses stood on the experimental platform, but they didn't touch any objects in the real world. "Get in," Bernadette's voice sounded again. Odysseus pulled open the carriage door and saw the pink seats inside, along with some girlish decorations. He stepped into the carriage, and as soon as he closed the door, the outside scenery suddenly became colorful, then illusory, making it impossible to distinguish direction or time. The carriage was carrying Odysseus through the spirit world. After about 10 seconds, the outside scenery became colorful again, and the carriage stopped. Odysseus saw that he was already in a private room at Rosewood Restaurant. The phantom carriage disappeared, and Odysseus completely returned to the real world. Bernadette sat on one of the chairs and extended her hand towards Odysseus. "Let me see what you were busy with just now." Odysseus handed her the manuscript. "Have you ordered?" "You order," Bernadette said, looking at the manuscript. Odysseus had originally wanted to make Bernadette pay a lot, but since he was late, he didn't want to overdo it. He ordered 2 sets of £1.6 meals and a bottle of £2.16 wine, totaling over £5. After Bernadette finished reading the manuscript, she looked up at Odysseus. "You wrote this?" "Yes. Your handwriting is quite ugly," Bernadette commented. "Also, you should be able to digest the potion very soon." Chapter 69, A Toast to Her Majesty. For Bernadette, the fighting techniques written by Odysseus, though ingenious, were of no use. However, Odysseus's overview of fighting in the general outline made Bernadette feel incredibly novel, as if she had read a novel with a very exciting plot. Or rather, Bernadette had seen this method of digesting Beander characteristics with academic papers, but the content of those papers had little novelty. Most of them were summarizing the experiences of predecessors, not like Odysseus, who was redefining fighting. Especially the meaning of endowing fighting with the punishment of others' evil deeds and the promotion of kindness was enough to transform this barbaric combat technique. She returned the manuscript to Odysseus and pointedly said, "It seems you know many secrets about Beander characteristics. Like the acting method." Odysseus smiled. Not much, I don't know that many." Bernadette casually asked, "When did you start writing this paper?" "This isn't a paper." Odysseus introduced, "I plan to write a book about fighting, organizing the theoretical and practical knowledge of fighting." Bernadette was stunned. This was something she hadn't expected. She picked up the black tea, took a shallow sip, and then repeated, "Your Beander characteristics should be digested very quickly." "Thank you." At this moment, the waiter began to serve the dishes, and the two began to chat aimlessly, from current international politics to the current weather in Backland. Odysseus glanced at the sunlight outside. "The weather is really good today, it's been sunny for most of the day." Bernadette, however, shook her head. "After coming to Backland, I have to use witchcraft to dehumidify my room every day. Only a vampire would like the ghostly weather in this city." Odysseus recalled a priest from the Earth Mother Church, it seems so. Then he changed the subject, I have a way to temporarily dispel the thick fog in Backland. Are you interested? Bernadette, who was cutting her steak, glanced at Odysseus, what's the point of dispelling it? It's no benefit to me. Odysseus thought for a moment and then said, how about we share that technology? Bernadette smiled, tell me, what is your purpose in dispelling the fog? How do you need my help? Odysseus sighed, I'm doing an experiment on a hurricane array, but as you know, it's very dangerous to do such an experiment under the nose of the Storm Church. I need you to help me hide my tracks. Just for an experiment? Bernadette asked, putting down her knife and fork. Of course, there are some other purposes, such as collecting some key data. Odysseus said with a grin. Bernadette stared into Odysseus's eyes for a second or two before saying, you are very smart, you already know how to circumvent my mysticism. Odysseus's two answers did not directly answer the question. His answers were true, so his nose did not grow longer, but they might not have been his main purpose. Bernadette smiled, let me think, why do you want to use a hurricane array to temporarily dispel the fog? It's certainly not to change Backland's environment. And I only know of a breeze array, I've never heard of a hurricane array. Obviously, it's a powerful array that you've improved. Even if it's just to temporarily dispel the fog, it requires a strong wind. Such a practical and advanced array, and you're going to share it with me. She concluded with a smile, the matter you are secretly planning is definitely not small. Odysseus, however, still did not state his purpose, everyone has secrets, don't they? For example, when I saw you, I thought of Emperor Roussel's portrait. Bernadette shrugged indifferently, many people can make that connection. Odysseus put a piece of beef into his mouth, chewed it slowly, and only after finishing chewing did he say, how about I build you a ship? Bernadette smiled, I'm not short of ships, I even have my own shipyard. It will be twice as fast as the most advanced steel dreadnought today, and its firepower can even resist a small cruiser fleet. Odysseus said, of course, the most important thing is that as long as the array on the ship is maintained, it can theoretically continuously obtain power. Bernadette smiled with satisfaction, I finally feel your sincerity. I will provide you with help, and even if you have very dangerous plans, I will try my best to save your life. This reminded Bernadette of the ship model she had seen in Odysseus's house. She, of course, knew that this ship must be an application of Odysseus's core research. Odysseus raised his glass and smiled, cheers to our cooperation. Cheers to our cooperation. Bernadette clinked glasses with Odysseus, took a sip of wine, and then picked up her dinner knife again, saying, my premonition was correct, a major event is about to happen in Backland recently. Odysseus smiled without speaking. Being able to ask a Sequence 3 for help would make the year-end operation much safer. He did not continue the topic but said, you just said you have a shipyard. Bernadette joked, can't I? I'm just sighing that you're very wealthy. Odysseus said truthfully, is being a pirate very profitable? Bernadette was not surprised that Odysseus had recognized her, you have to see what level of pirate it is. Odysseus spread his arms, look at me, do I have the potential to be a pirate? Yes, because you already possess the most difficult condition for a pirate to achieve. What condition? Having a powerful backer. Odysseus was slightly stunned, I don't have a backer at sea. You do now. Odysseus understood, raised his glass, and smiled, to Her Majesty the Queen. Cheers. Bernadette corrected, you can just call me Your Highness. Okay, Your Majesty the Queen. For both of them, this meal was quite fruitful. Bernadette successfully established a deep level of cooperation with Odysseus and also established a non-binding superior-subordinate relationship with Odysseus. Odysseus, on the other hand, received the protection of a high-sequence Beander and left himself a fallback. After they had eaten and drunk their fill, Odysseus asked Bernadette to send him back from the spirit world. The machinery hivemind might monitor him for the next few days. His sudden appearance at Rosewood Restaurant from the backyard of the herbal shop would cause some trouble. Therefore, it would be better to simply return to the backyard of the herbal shop through the spirit world. Bernadette would also use some mysticism to make the restaurant waiter who had just served them forget that Odysseus had been there. Back in the backyard of the herbal shop, Odysseus was about to continue writing the fighting outline when the majestic figure of Fool suddenly appeared in his mind, followed by the prayer scene of Little Sun. It turned out that Little Sun had captured the creature from the land abandoned by God that Odysseus needed. Chapter 70 The Honest and Reliable, Little Sun. At the last Tarot Club meeting, Odysseus made a deal with the son Derek. Odysseus would help Derek find information about Aemon, while Derek would provide Hermit with some creatures and soil from the land abandoned by God. Odysseus then thought, Derek seems to have been monitored after the Amon clone incident, right? Under surveillance, would he still dare to make sacrifices to the fool? But then he had a change of heart. I remember now, at first, Derek didn't realize he was being monitored, so he continued to make sacrifices and pray as usual. Odysseus smiled. He certainly wouldn't remind Derek, because he didn't know that the son had been parasitized by an Amon clone yet. So Odysseus returned to the suburban laboratory via the teleportation array in the basement. He planned to process the corpses of those creatures and temporarily store them in this laboratory. After preparing a simple altar, Odysseus prayed to the fool and performed the bestowal ritual. An illusory door opened above the altar, and 4 strange creatures, a bucket of sludge, and a bucket of soil appeared on the altar. Odysseus was about to praise Mr. Fool when he suddenly saw a gaping maw. The strange fish, as thick as an adult's thigh and over a meter long, actually raised its head and bit Odysseus. Odysseus hurriedly dodged and said with a wry smile, "It's alive." The sun actually captured these creatures alive and sacrificed them to the fool just like that. Above the gray mist, Klein, sitting at the head of the bronze long table, watched the flustered hermit, a slight smile playing on his lips. In the suburban laboratory, after Odysseus dodged the large mouth, he picked up the sword from the corner of the wall and plunged it into the strange fish's body, simultaneously injecting spirituality to immediately discharge electricity, and continuously discharging electricity, stunning the monster to the ground. Odysseus had used this sword before at Cape Town's villa. Although he carried it with him, he hadn't used it. When Odysseus was tidying up the laboratory in the morning, he conveniently placed it in the corner. It was fortunate that this weapon was here, otherwise it would have been difficult to deal with this strange fish. Then he saw 6 large leech-like creatures crawling out of the altar and moving towards the surroundings. Odysseus quickly picked up tweezers and glass bottles, putting them into the bottles one by one, and then found a sharp knife to first butcher the strange fish, carefully preserving its black blood. Finally, Odysseus looked at the plant with dark green leaves on the altar. Its 8 tentacle-like vines were slowly reaching towards Odysseus. Odysseus found a large pair of scissors, carefully bypassed the slow-moving tentacles, approached the altar, and snipped off these tentacles, one by one. These vines, which had suckers and barbs, truly behaved like tentacles, twitching on the ground for a long time before becoming still. Odysseus found a large glass jar and put the plant's rhizome into it, then found another large glass jar to put the tentacles together. After dealing with these dangerous fellows, Odysseus then went to look at the 2 green plants that resembled wheat. This was black-faced grass. It was said that its leaves would turn black after maturing. It was the only thing that looked normal and was close to Odysseus's understanding. However, these black-faced grass were rapidly wilting after leaving City of Silver. Odysseus collected them in containers. Only then did he breathe a sigh of relief, unsure whether to say that the son was too honest or that he was not thoughtful enough. He could probably guess the son's thoughts. Since Hermit was taking them for experiments, they must be alive. So the son spent a lot of effort to sacrifice these creatures alive to the fool. The most infuriating thing was that the fool didn't even give a reminder. But soon, Odysseus understood the fool Klein's thoughts. As a mysterious and great existence, how could he pay attention to such trivial matters? Moreover, Hermit could completely deal with these monsters, so no reminder was needed. Thinking of this, Odysseus smiled helplessly. How did that saying go? Oh, right, in the end, I had to bear everything alone. While letting his mind wander, he tidied up the laboratory. After confirming that the creatures could not escape the glass jars, Odysseus returned to the herb shop and continued to write the fighting outline. He planned to conduct observations and records first, and then study these creatures. On Saturday morning, Odysseus took a carriage directly from his home to 77 Hilton Avenue. As usual, he put on the leader mask, donned a hooded cloak, and used the teleportation array in the basement to arrive at the Mysticism Research Society's gathering place. Several members of the Mysticism Research Society had already arrived and paid their respects to the leader. Among these members was Zio. Seeing the leader, she began to ponder how to obtain information about Cape Town's case later. At exactly 9 o'clock, Odysseus announced, "Let's begin." The hound, who was unremarkable in build and attire, was the first to stand up. "Leader, please accept my salute." After giving a serious military salute, he continued, "I've been thinking for several days and still can't figure out how you detected that the wealthy merchant Blair was controlled by someone from the Rose School of Thought." This statement instantly caused an uproar in the venue. What? The wealthy merchant Blair was controlled by someone from the Rose School of Thought? Who is Blair? Have you forgotten? At last week's gathering, someone heard that Blair was going to hire a Beander for a mysticism experiment. Quote. Because Blair's case did not appear in the newspapers, and Machinery Hivemind only notified other official Beander organizations, most of the people present did not know about the changes in the wealthy merchant Blair's villa. Huo also recalled that someone had indeed posted a commission from the wealthy merchant Blair at the last gathering. But how did it get involved with the Rose School? Huo had heard of this hidden organization and knew that its members were extremely crazy and cruel. Soon, the gathering place quieted down, and everyone looked at the leader. Odysseus smiled and said, "This requires extensive experience in intelligence work and extensive knowledge of mysticism. In that commission, the particular emphasis on full moon as a condition caught my attention. At the same time, I also received news that last week, there was a conflict within the Rose School of Thought in the dock area of Backland. Connecting them, you'll find that the wealthy merchant Blair seemed to be looking for traces of Rose School members, so I speculate that he might have been used or controlled by one of the parties involved in the internal conflict of the Rose School of Thought." At this point, someone immediately asked, "Why is full moon connected to the Rose School of Thought?" Odysseus smiled and said, "This information requires payment, with a total value of £200. Immediately, many people participated in the transaction, and Huo also participated, quickly raising the £200. Chapter 71 The Mysterious and Powerful Leader. After the leader finished writing the answer, the attendant took it and began to let the people who had paid for the intelligence read it in sequence. Soon it was Huo's turn, and she once again saw the leader's somewhat scrawled handwriting. Rose School is mainly composed of Beyonders from the prisoner pathway. Sequence 7 of the prisoner pathway is called werewolf, and sequence 6 is called zombie. Most people should have heard of the former, who transforms into an irrational werewolf during the full moon, while the latter becomes very weak during the full moon, craving the warm blood of living people. So it's easy to find Beyonders of these two sequences during the full moon, which is why I thought of the Rose School. Huo returned the slip of paper to the attendant, so that's how it is. It truly requires rich knowledge of mysticism, as well as extensive experience in intelligence work, to make such a deduction. After everyone saw the intelligence on the slip of paper, they all admired the leader's erudition and his keen insight. When most people had finished reading the intelligence, the gathering continued. Lion Byron stood up and said, "Mr. Leader, I haven't had a chance to thank you these past few days. Today, I finally see you again." He bowed deeply, "Thank you for your rescue. If you ever need anything in the future, please don't hesitate to command me. I am always at your service." This was equivalent to a public declaration of loyalty. Heh. Elephant suddenly chuckled. "Do you think you have the ability to help the leader solve problems?" This fellow had no particular motive, he was just being a jerk. Byron, however, immediately said, "I imagine the leader will always have some trivial matters to handle, and I can certainly do them on his behalf." Elephant was about to make a couple more sarcastic remarks, but Odysseus smiled first and said, "I already promised to do my best to save your life, there's no need to dwell on it." "No," Byron said, "to you, it might not be a big deal, but to me, it's extremely important." "All right." Odysseus also stopped declining, "If there's a need, I'll notify you." Byron bowed deeply again before returning to his seat. The female member Peacock said, "It seems Lion was discovered by Cape Town's people, but now there's no need to worry about Cape Town's retaliation. Cape Town is already dead." At this moment, Wolverine suddenly said, "I heard that Cape Town was shot dead by the leader." "What?" Peacock instantly lost her usual composure. "The leader is Black Emperor, the Black Emperor." The others also discussed spiritedly. This was the second surprising piece of news at this gathering. Wolverine saw that the leader didn't stop him, so he continued, "The leader also appeared at the scene of Cape Town's death." But this news was still surprising, and everyone speculated about the relationship between the leader and Black Emperor. Lion Byron, seeing that everyone had misunderstood the leader, quickly helped explain, "At that time, the leader was going to save me and happened to catch Black Emperor's action." Everyone almost simultaneously let out an "oh," understanding what had happened. Huo also slowly nodded, so that's how it was. But immediately after, she felt that this matter was not simple. Just now, Wolverine said that the leader shot Cape Town, while the masked man said that the leader shot one of Cape Town's subordinates. Why were the two descriptions different? So Huo asked, "Mr. Leader, did you also participate in the battle between Black Emperor and Cape Town at that time?" "Yes," Odysseus said, One of Cape Town's subordinates mistakenly thought I was Black Emperor's accomplice, so he attacked me. I had no choice but to retaliate. Peacock laughed. As a result, with one counterattack, you took down Cape Town himself. Odysseus smiled. I was just defending myself. Everyone showed an, I understand, expression, and Giraffe even said, honestly, if I had the chance, I would also take the opportunity to kill that scumbag. Wolverine, however, said, I advise you not to mess around. You don't have the protection of the church. As far as I know, Archbishop Horamek of the Church of Steam and Machinery personally intervened, and the leader was not subjected to further investigation. If it were a wild meander, the investigation would certainly not end there. Black Emperor had left, but after all, so many lives were lost, so a few people would always be arrested as a formality. Hugh listened to everyone's conversation and roughly understood. It seems that both Wolverine's and the masked man's descriptions were accurate. The leader not only killed Cape Town but also killed at least one of Cape Town's subordinates. Then Hugh was a little curious. Why did the masked man emphasize killing Cape Town's subordinate? And not mention killing Cape Town himself? At the same time, Peacock asked, Leader, did Cape Town's subordinates include any Beyonders? Odysseus replied, yes. No one found this strange, as many Beyonders didn't care if the money they earned was dirty. Peacock then asked, what sequence were they? Odysseus smiled. That cannot be said. Not a single mistake, not a single omission in the content. This truly cannot be said. If everyone knew that Cape Town's subordinates included a sequence 6 Beyonder from the Arbiter pathway, they would certainly make many connections. At that time, it would very likely attract the attention of the Loan royal family. Odysseus believed that the leader should already be under surveillance by MI9, but with the protection of machinery hivemind, they were merely observing. However, his answer was already enough to make people realize that there was a certain hidden truth here. After all, if it were just a few low-sequence Beyonders, the leader could very well tell everyone, but his answer was, that cannot be said. All the intelligence personnel sensed that this answer was very unusual. Even the leader couldn't speak of it, which showed that Cape Town's case was far from as simple as imagined. Hugh's question was also answered. Cape Town's subordinates had significant backgrounds, which was why they drew the masked man's attention. Odysseus did not continue discussing this topic but said, I have an important announcement to make. From today onwards, the sale of potion formulas will no longer be prohibited at this gathering. This news immediately attracted everyone's attention, and their speculations about the Cape Town case were instantly thrown to the back of their minds. Especially those members who were not yet Beyonders, it was as if they suddenly had hope of becoming a Beyonder. And members like Peacock and Wolverine all smiled. This would be a good opportunity to recruit new members for the organization. But then Odysseus continued, I have potion formulas for 6 pathways here for everyone to purchase. Each formula is 230 pounds. Below, I will explain the pathways these formulas belong to, as well as their characteristics. Peacock and Wolverine, among other members, immediately stopped smiling, because whether or not to announce the sale of potion formulas at this gathering, they had to report to their superiors. In other words, they could only sell formulas at the next gathering. And at this gathering, the leader had already given everyone 6 choices, so they would likely not be able to recruit any new members. Chapter 72, Magic Potion Recipe Wholesale Market. Odysseus explained to everyone, the 6 pathways are Mystery Prior, Sailor, Spectator, Apprentice, and Bard. The members all strained their ears, afraid of missing a single word. First, let's talk about the Mystery Prior, Odysseus said. Beyonders of this pathway have abundant spirituality and possess spirit vision. Their learning ability is significantly enhanced, and after becoming a Mystery Prior, they gain certain mysticism knowledge and can master many ritualistic magic spells. The Seer, as the name suggests, has core abilities in divination. They are proficient in astrolabe divination, cane divination, dream divination, and so on. Also, because their spirituality is quite abundant, they also possess spirit vision. The Sailor can move as agilely as a fish in water, able to dive to a depth of 15 meters without any protective gear and move freely underwater for more than 10 minutes. They also have a layer of illusory scales on their body that can help the Beyonder withstand a certain amount of damage. I must remind everyone to choose this pathway cautiously, because the mandated punishers are Beyonders of this pathway. I am confident I can help you obtain the subsequent potion formulas, but most of the materials for brewing potions are controlled by the Storm Church. The Spectator pathway allows one to have an observation ability far beyond ordinary people, making it easy to discern a person's true thoughts from their expressions and demeanor. The Apprentice pathway has an extraordinarily practical ability called open door, from the very beginning. Even in a confined space, they can open an illusory door to leave. The bard can bring courage and strength to themselves and their companions through song. Odysseus finished speaking in one breath, and the gathering fell silent for a moment. Even the hounds hadn't expected that the leader possessed so many potion formulas, instantly turning the Mysticism Research Society's gathering into a wholesale market for potion formulas. Although some of the members here belonged to a Beander organization, most of them had only seen the potion formulas for their own pathway. Few could, like the leader, rattle off 6 sequence 9 potion formulas in one go. At this moment, Furs thought, the leader actually has the apprentice potion formula. However, Furs has already obtained the Trickmaster potion formula, otherwise I could have asked the leader if he had subsequent formulas for apprentice. She, of course, didn't know that the leader's apprentice potion formula was traded from her good friend. I want to become a seer, said the giraffe, whose neck was a bit longer than average, first. This sentence seemed like a command, and the members quickly started a frenzy of buying potion formulas. 10 members immediately paid £230 on the spot and obtained the potion formulas. 2 members reserved potion formulas because they didn't bring enough money. Several other members were more cautious and wanted to consider it further, to decide at the next gathering. However, this was still good. After all, Odysseus only spent £780 and some knowledge to acquire these potion formulas. Today, he broke even and made a large profit. At the same time, the overall strength of the Mysticism Research Society was enhanced, which was an intangible gain. After obtaining the potion formulas, many people's hearts were restless for a long time. It took 4 or 5 minutes before they returned to the intelligence trading session. The hound asked Furs and the other 2, "How did you complete the task I assigned earlier?" Previously, he had issued a task to find out who the Punisher informant had met before his death. A member smiled and said, "I did some investigation, but everyone I could find was already in the information you provided. Sorry, I don't plan to continue this task." The hound sighed, "I'll increase the reward. I'm willing to pay £20 for each person found." The member who just spoke smiled, "I seem to have renewed motivation." Furs then said, "I found some clues, but I'm still investigating." The hound smiled, "I look forward to your news." The previous potion formula transaction had excited everyone, so the intelligence trading session was also quite lively. Some received commissions, while others obtained the intelligence they needed. Around 10 o'clock, Odysseus announced the end of the gathering. Subsequently, Odysseus, with the £2,500 gained from this gathering, left the basement. He was rich again. 15 Minsk Street, Cherwood Borough. Ding-a-ling-a-ling. Klein, who had just returned from an outing, was about to prepare lunch for himself when he suddenly heard the doorbell. He hurried to the door. The moment his hand touched the doorknob, the scene outside the door appeared before Klein's eyes. The visitor was an old man in his 50s, with some graying hair, dressed as a butler. He opened the door. "Hello. Hello, Mr. Moriarty." The old man, carrying a briefcase, had a perfectly appropriate smile on his face. "I heard about your deeds from a friend." Klein smiled, "I hope they weren't bad deeds. Please come in." After inviting the old man to sit on the sofa, Klein poured tea and said, "How may I help you?" The old man opened his bag, took out a folder, and handed it to Klein. "I hope you can secretly investigate this person for me. This contains some information about him." Klein opened the folder and first saw a very realistic portrait. The person in the painting wore a mask, was tall and slender, dressed in a black trench coat, and held a cigar in his hand. The moment he saw the portrait, Klein recognized him. It was Mr. Gale. Then he noticed that the masked man he had seen at Cape Town's place a few days ago was slightly different from Mr. Gale. Firstly, the style of the mask was different, and secondly, the person seen in Cape Town's villa wore a cloak, while Mr. Gale wore a trench coat, and his demeanor seemed different. However, Klein had already divined that the person he encountered that day was indeed Mr. Gale. He speculated that this might be 2 identities for Mr. Gale, or merely 2 different outfits. Continuing to flip through, there was very little information about Mr. Gale in the document, only the general process of how he founded the Nanmu Ballroom. However, there was a lot of information about Ms. Mandy and Mr. Gale's subordinate, Enoch. Klein closed the document, pondered for a moment, and then asked, "What kind of investigation are you looking for?" The old man said, "Find out this gentleman's residence and preferences, whether he has a wife or children, and who he is working for." Klein pushed the document back. "If it's just to investigate this gentleman's residence and preferences, I can consider taking this commission." If it's to investigate his wife and children, I need to know what you want this information for, and I need to know who the employer is. You are quite a righteous detective, the old man smiled. But you should know that the ballroom this person operates has harmed countless innocent young women. Investigating him is the true act of justice. Klein smiled. Sorry, I cannot accept this commission. He had a good impression of Mr. Gale and did not want him to be blackmailed by others. Chapter 73 Klein's new commission. The elderly man dressed as a butler was somewhat surprised by Detective Moriarty's refusal. The reward for this commission will be very generous. Klein smiled. Unless I know your true purpose, and who your employer is. If he hadn't met Mr. Gale before, he might have believed the old man's words, but he had been to the Nanmu ballroom, and had met Mr. Gale. Klein had his own judgment regarding what Mr. Gale was doing, so he wouldn't easily believe the old man's words. All right. The old man took a deep breath and said, if a friend hadn't strongly recommended you to me, I wouldn't tell you this. He said seriously, my employer is Lord Ashburn. He is very disgusted with Gale's actions of harming Backland women and hopes to rescue them. As for your reward, as long as you can find any one of the 3 points mentioned before, you will get £50. If you can find all the information we need, I will pay you £180. For an investigation commission, such a reward was indeed very generous, but it also indirectly indicated that this commission must be very difficult. As for the employer's purpose, Klein was not entirely convinced. He stood up and said, excuse me, I need to use the restroom. He was more inclined to accept this commission because he was also very interested in Mr. Gale, but he had to divine whether there would be any danger after accepting this commission, as Mr. Gale was also a Beander. Entering the restroom, Klein took out the citrine pendant. He silently chanted in his mind, accepting this commission is very dangerous. Accepting this commission is very dangerous. Quote. After chanting 7 times, Klein saw the crystal pendant slowly rotate clockwise. This meant there was a slight danger, but it was acceptable. Whoosh! He turned on the toilet's water valve, creating the illusion of flushing the toilet, then returned to the parlor and said to the old man, I accept this commission. There was nothing urgent recently, so Klein planned to investigate Mr. Gale and also investigate what Lord Ashburn was plotting. Saturday afternoon, at Gall Herbal Shop. Simon visited again to report the information he had gathered to Odysseus. I treated a few waiters at the underground fighting arena to a meal and finally found a way to inquire about other contestants' information. That's a male servant responsible for cleaning the referee's room and lounge. He has the opportunity to witness many matches during work and knows many contestants. The underground boxing boss, with a sinister look, smiled and said, I've established a long-term cooperative relationship with him. I pay him £5 each time to get information about opponents. If he hasn't seen the opponent, he can also ask others. Odysseus slowly nodded. Very good. I'll pay these £5. There's no need to deduct them from your share. Yes, I knew you wouldn't be stingy with such small money. Simon smiled. Now Odysseus had become his money tree, bringing him an extra £20 or £30 in income every week, so of course he had to humble himself. Simon continued, this time the match is different from the last. It seems that after knowing you have a special weapon, they temporarily don't plan to let you participate in matches where weapons can be used. Instead, it will be a no-holds-barred fighting match. No weapons can be used in the fight, only pure no-rules combat. The rules are the same as most underground fighting arenas in Backland. The match ends as soon as someone is knocked out or concedes because they can't beat their opponent. Your opponent is named Eden, and he is said to have very magical abilities. He can make a person very unlucky, easily fall down, and can also create flashes, mist, and so on. The most amazing thing is that he can easily push open walls and hide inside houses. Odysseus immediately understood that this must be a trickmaster. Among low-sequence Beyonders, trickmasters were considered Beyonders with relatively rich abilities. Especially their falling down technique, which was very useful in free fighting. But in Odysseus's opinion, this sequence also had major drawbacks, such as low health and low defense. I understand. Odysseus nodded and reached for his pipe, but quickly put it down, because the big fire at Cape Town Villa the day before yesterday had irritated his throat. If it were an ordinary person, they would probably cough for a while, but as a sequence 8, Odysseus only felt a slight discomfort in his throat. Simon added, also, tomorrow's match time has been changed to the afternoon. Please prepare in advance. I'll pick you up at 2 o'clock. Odysseus was contemplating how to deal with the trickmaster, only giving a casual, in response. I also got a piece of information that I don't know is true or false. Odysseus looked at Simon, tell me. It is said that your opponent Eden belongs to a fighting organization. This organization is basically composed of excellent fighters from the underground fighting arena, and anyone who has defeated them will be retaliated against. Odysseus smiled slightly. What is the attitude of the nobles fighting arena towards them? Simon smiled, revealing a mouthful of yellow teeth. The fighting arena only needs exciting matches. His implication was that because they could provide exciting matches, the people in the underground fighting arena chose to ignore the organization. Odysseus nodded. He knew about this organization. The reason Odysseus actively participated in Meander fighting matches, besides honing his fighting skills, was also largely because of this organization. It sounded like they were just fixing matches, but they also did many unspeakable things for the nobles. When Odysseus was at Sequence 9, he repeatedly exposed their evil deeds to the machinery hivemind, but the machinery hivemind, under pressure from the nobles, failed to arrest them or even launch a proper investigation. Of course, Odysseus didn't have a complete plan at first. It was only in the last 2 days that he thought he could use some characteristics of this organization to try and eliminate several members of this organization. After Simon left, Odysseus prepared to wear a knight's suit with a defensive magic circle in tomorrow's match. As long as he could withstand the opponent's tricks and get close to them, he could easily defeat them. With a basic strategy for dealing with the enemy, Odysseus continued to the backyard to write the fighting outline. Klein's investigation into Mr. Gale began at the Nanmu ballroom. That night, under the cover of darkness, he ambushed in the back street of the ballroom, hiding in a corner for over half an hour, finally waiting for some of the waiters to get off work. Klein quietly followed one of them, knocked him out, and then brought him to an undisturbed dark alley. He first used Amanda, dew, essential oils extracted from deep sleep flowers, and other materials rich in spirituality to put the opponent's spirit body in a very relaxed state, then built a spirituality wall, and performed telepathy. Because Klein didn't know the moral alignment of the person in front of him, he used a telepathy method he learned from Ms. Daly, which caused less harm to others. Otherwise, forcibly performing telepathy would definitely cause irreversible damage to the opponent's mind-body. Soon, the originally unconscious waiter suddenly sat up, opened his eyes, and looked ahead with a dazed expression. Klein also used meditation to put himself in a semi-conscious, chaotic state, and controlled his spirit body to enter the spirit world, invading the opponent's mind-body. At this moment, countless memories surged around Klein. Chapter 74, The Rival, Master of Magic, Additional Update. Telepathy with the living is quite different from telepathy with the dead. Even if a living person's mind is in a state of chaos, they haven't lost basic logic. So, once Klein enters the other party's mind-body, all of the other party's memories will surge around Klein's spirituality, constantly flowing like water. At this point, he must carefully search for the memories he needs, otherwise, the other party's logic and memories will become disordered, turning him into a madman or a fool. However, telepathy with the dead is not so troublesome. The other party's memories will be like stagnant water laid out before him, and there's no need to worry about harming a dead person. Klein used divination to obtain the memories he needed, a method that would not cause any harm to the waiter. Memories about Mr. Gale. Memories about Mr. Gale. Quote. After silently repeating it 7 times, the surging waves of memory receded, leaving only a portion of memories appearing before Klein. To his surprise, the waiter didn't have many memories about Mr. Gale. Among these memories, some were from the early days of the Nanmu ballroom, when other gangs came to cause trouble. Mr. Gale stepped forward to deal with them, politely sending them away, and the next day, it was heard that the gang's boss had died. There were also instances where some distinguished guests caused trouble, and Mr. Gale sternly drove them away, protecting the safety of the ladies. However, since about a year and a half ago, the ballroom's business gradually became regular, and Mr. Gale rarely appeared in the ballroom. Ms. Mandy basically managed the business here. But the waiters still occasionally heard rumors about Mr. Gale, such as someone intending to cause trouble at the Nanmu ballroom, but being dealt with by Mr. Gale before they could even act. Another rumor was that Mr. Gale was actually an earl who established the Nanmu ballroom, out of sympathy for the plight of the street ladies. Now that the ballroom had little that required his attention, he returned to his castle to enjoy life. The only useful memory might be that Mr. Gale frequently appeared in a room on the 3rd floor of the ballroom. That room directly faced the 3rd floor reception desk and no one was allowed to enter it. After reviewing these memories one by one, Klein gained a deeper understanding of Mr. Gale. He was very resourceful and could still control the ballroom even when he wasn't there. Then Klein began to divine again the living conditions of the ladies in the Nanmu ballroom. The state of the ladies in the Nanmu ballroom. Quote. Many memories gathered again, and Klein selected a few to look at. Some showed the ladies dancing with guests, while others showed the ladies returning to their dorms together. This waiter even witnessed a ladies' wedding to the ballroom's chef. The ceremony was held in the ballroom, and Ms. Mandy sternly warned the chef not to disrespect the lady because of her past experiences. After marriage, the lady used her savings to open a dessert shop, while the chef continued to work at the ballroom. Last month, their daughter was just born. After looking at a few more memories, Klein exited the telepathy state. At this point, he no longer doubted Mr. Gale's purpose in establishing the Nanmu ballroom. Klein then moved the waiter back to the street he had been walking on, making him appear to have stumbled. When the waiter woke up, he would think he had hit his head when he fell and had been unconscious for a short while. He returned to the shadows of the street to hide, planning to explore the third-floor room tonight. As usual, he divined his next actions. The upcoming exploration will be safe. The upcoming action will be safe. Quote. Clink. After silently repeating it 7 times, he flicked the coin in his hand, and it landed in his palm. It was tails. Not safe. Klein took out his citrine pendant again to divine. The upcoming exploration is dangerous. The upcoming exploration is dangerous. Quote. After silently repeating it 7 times, the pendant spun clockwise, at a moderate speed. There is a certain danger. Klein guessed that Mr. Gale might have set up some Beander traps in that room. So he followed his intuition and cancelled the upcoming exploration. On Sunday afternoon, Simon picked up Odysseus to attend a fighting match. On the way to the competition, Odysseus saw several ragged beggars on the street from the car window, begging. He suddenly said, "There are still many people in Backland who don't have homes." Simon didn't quite understand what Odysseus meant, so he didn't dare to respond. Odysseus just suddenly thought of the scene in the simulated arena and could only sigh inwardly, "This is Backland." The longer he lived here, the more he felt that this city indeed had a glamorous side, but it wasn't as good as people said. Arriving at King's Avenue 155, Odysseus saw the middle-aged man dressed as a butler again. The procedure was the same as last time. He first explained the rules. Although weapons were not allowed in the arena, one could use the props inside to attack opponents. What was different from last time was that there was a body search this time. Odysseus handed his cane and gun holster to Simon and calmly accepted the body search. Nothing was missed. Aside from the slightly thick knight's uniform he was wearing, the attendant did not find any weapons. As before, after sitting still for more than 10 minutes, the match began. Odysseus entered the arena through the iron gate, and the street with buildings on both sides that had no roofs reappeared before his eyes. Although it was daytime this time, the lights inside were still on, making it impossible to see the audience stands clearly. However, Odysseus's spirituality sensed that there were many spectators above at this moment. On the way here, Simon said that on Sundays, there were 3 rounds of matches here, one in the afternoon, one at 7 in the evening, and the last one at 9 in the evening. The afternoon match was no rules fighting, the evening one was no rules fighting, or fighting with cold weapons. As for the 9 o'clock match, Simon didn't know what kind of match it was. At this moment, Odysseus saw his opponent, a man around 30 years old, very thin, also wearing a dark knight's uniform. After the match began, neither of them rushed to attack, but instead walked towards each other step by step. Odysseus realized that today's opponent was more difficult to deal with than the last one, not only because the opponent's sequence was higher, but also because the opponent was very confident and neither rushed nor was impatient. When the two were still about 7 or 8 meters apart, Odysseus's opponent, Eden, suddenly smiled and said, "Your aura is quite good, you don't seem like a newcomer." Odysseus did not speak, but suddenly launched an attack. Eden suddenly raised a hand, and Odysseus only felt his feet slip, immediately losing his balance and falling to the ground. This was completely unexpected, and Odysseus grimaced in pain, finding it difficult to get up for a moment. Applause immediately broke out in the stands. This was Eden's usual move. Although they had seen it many times, everyone still found it amazing and didn't understand how he did it. The fighting arena's explanation was, "This is a magical technique." Eden quickly moved forward, seizing the opportunity, and while laughing, said, "Too impatient." He then kicked hard towards Odysseus's face. Just then, Odysseus seemed to suddenly feel no pain. After dodging Eden's kick, he swept his leg, hitting Eden's other leg. Immediately, Eden was kicked down. A small gasp escaped from the audience stands, and everyone realized that Eden had been tricked. This extra update is because author John had a very good inspiration yesterday and wrote an extra chapter. Since author Jun basically writes and publishes on the fly, he decided to add an extra chapter since he wrote more. Additionally, author Jun wants to thank everyone for their subscriptions. The performance of this book is much better than Mysteries, The New Black Emperor Descends. Generally, the first recommendation after listing comes when the average subscription reaches 500. It took a month and a half for the previous book to reach an average subscription of 500, while now, after about a week of listing, the average subscription is almost at 400. Thank you very much for your support and subscriptions. When it gets recommended, if conditions allow, there will be more updates. Hollow down pointing triangle. Chapter 75 Victory Comes Too Easy. This was Odysseus's strategy. Since the opponent's falling down technique and other tricks were difficult to deal with, he could lure the opponent close and then launch an attack. When Eden first spoke, Odysseus knew that he would fall for it, because Eden was overly confident and likely to underestimate him. Things went exactly as Odysseus expected. He successfully kicked Eden down, then immediately jumped up to pursue. After Eden rolled a few times, he raised his hand towards Odysseus again, and a thick fog suddenly appeared in front of the two of them. Odysseus actually charged right into it. As soon as he entered the dense fog, Odysseus was ambushed, a punch striking his chest. But Odysseus seemed to feel no pain. He grabbed Eden's wrist with one hand and, with the other hand clenched into a fist, fiercely struck the opponent's armpit, sending him flying to crash hard against a wall. Inside the knight's attire Odysseus wore, there was an improved defense array that he had drawn. Low sequence fist and foot strikes were just tickles to him. The mist quickly dispersed, and Odysseus pursued relentlessly, continuing his attack. Eden quickly pressed his hand against the wall behind him, opening an illusory door, and escaped into the room. He leaned against the wall, holding his armpit. With a pained expression, he felt like he would almost faint from the pain with every breath he took. But Eden dared not linger and quickly ran to the other side of the room. Odysseus indeed immediately jumped onto the top of the wall, and just as he was about to continue his attack, Eden stretched out a hand, and his whole body suddenly erupted with light, illuminating the entire room brightly. Odysseus was prepared. He turned his head away, but his eyes were still slightly dazzled. Everything in front of him darkened for a second or two before returning to normal. But by this time, Eden had already used his open door ability again to escape the room. Odysseus continued his pursuit, then suddenly his feet slipped again, and he fell from the top of the wall. He quickly flipped, landing on his back, and the knight's attire once again helped him absorb the damage from the fall. This time he did not stop, but sprang up fiercely, chasing his opponent at the fastest speed. With that delay, Eden had already run out 6 or 7 meters. Although Odysseus was agile, he was not good at running. After chasing for half a minute, he only closed the distance by 1 or 2 meters. Eden's injuries were recovering well enough, and he once again came to a wall and pushed the door to enter. Odysseus, just like before, jumped to the top of the wall, and as soon as he stood on it, a cold gleam flew towards him. He quickly dodged. It was actually a sharp knife. It was then that Odysseus saw the situation inside the rooms clearly. These rooms were highly restored, with even bedsheets on the beds. Correspondingly, the kitchen also had a complete set of knives. That sharp knife just now was a knife from a kitchen. Eden was very familiar with the scene here, so he went directly into the kitchen and used the knives inside to attack Odysseus. According to the rules, although weapons could not be brought into the arena, the props inside could be used, and these knives were among those props. Throwing knives were also a type of trick. Eden, with a smile, threw the knives in his hand accurately at Odysseus one by one. Theoretically, at this point, Odysseus should immediately dodge and seek a way to counter the enemy. But Odysseus acted out of character, suddenly spreading his arms and lunging at Eden, letting the knives stab into his chest. This response was beyond the audience's expectations, and they gasped in surprise again. It also exceeded Eden's expectations. It was only when Odysseus lunged close that he reacted and retreated. But his retreat was still a bit late. Odysseus's outstretched arms struck fiercely, hitting Eden's ears. Eden immediately felt dizzy and disoriented, the ringing in his ears drowning out all other sounds, and he almost reflexively raised his hand and used the falling down technique. Odysseus's feet instantly slipped, but this time he held onto a table, supporting his entire body with one hand. Eden sat down on the ground with a somewhat bewildered look in his eyes. If it had been an ordinary person, Odysseus's last blow would have knocked him unconscious. Odysseus quickly moved forward, continuing his pursuit. Eden had no choice but to grit his teeth and persevere, his whole body once again emitting light, hoping to dazzle Odysseus's eyes and buy himself time to recover and escape. But Odysseus simply closed his eyes and kicked his opponent in the chest. Eden crashed into a cupboard and passed out. Only then did Odysseus casually pull out the two sharp knives stuck in his chest and throw them on the ground. It was then that everyone noticed that there was no blood on Odysseus's chest. The sharp knives hadn't even injured him. At this point, the referee announced, Lelouch wins. Odysseus was stunned for a moment before remembering that the name he had left here earlier was Lelouch. He kicked the door open and walked towards the iron gate with some disappointment. Not a single mistake, every first, every internal, every content in one glance. Odysseus had initially thought this would be an evenly matched opponent, but he didn't expect the opponent to rely entirely on his Beander abilities, quickly revealing his weakness of low defense once engaged in close combat. However, applause did erupt in the arena, more enthusiastic than the applause at the end of the last match. Although in terms of performance, this match wasn't particularly exciting, Odysseus once again demonstrated a huge advantage, defeating an enemy everyone considered quite strong, which is why he received applause. Odysseus ignored the applause and quickly returned to the lounge. The butler-like middle-aged man immediately stepped forward and smiled, Mr. Lelouch, you have won 2 consecutive matches. For the next match, we will arrange a stronger opponent for you. Please be prepared. Of course, the corresponding remuneration will also increase. Odysseus nodded. It's best if I don't win so easily again. He had originally come to hone his fighting skills, but both opponents were unsatisfactory. The previous one at least had decent fighting skills, but today's opponent's fighting skills were only slightly better than an ordinary person's. The butler-like middle-aged man hadn't had time to speak when a voice from the doorway already said, "What a big mouth." Odysseus looked towards the doorway. The person who had arrived was a middle-aged man with a small mustache. Odysseus had seen him before. It was when he returned to the lounge after the last match, and at that time, this middle-aged man was holding a two-handed greatsword, preparing for his match. The butler immediately smiled. Mr. Chipman. The middle-aged man named Chipman smiled slightly, then said to Odysseus, "Your fighting skills are indeed very impressive, but not to the extent that you have no opponents." Then he said, "How about we go outside and have a chat?" Odysseus, however, refused. "Sorry, no time." He chuckled. "I'm waiting for my reward." Chipman was slightly stunned, seemingly not expecting Odysseus to refuse. The butler immediately said, "It's coming right away." Then he said to Odysseus, "Mr. Lelouch, this Mr. Chipman is one of our top-tier fighters here." The implication was, "Don't refuse so bluntly." "I know." Odysseus nodded and said, "Mr. Chipman, your companion Eden is really not tough enough. For more thrilling fanfiction stories like this, check out my channel Fanfic Audiobook. Dive into epic adventures, mysterious realms, and legendary journeys brought to life through immersive storytelling. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing audiobooks.